Still working on our team. It would be so cheap if I could just do everything.
Yes. All right, we'll go ahead and call the May 7th, 2025 committee board meeting to order. Welcome to everybody. Nice after a nice dinner last night. Ready to roll. First thing we have is the full work session. And we'll start with that with the public comment session.
Just for the board members' reference, there are two items in public comment that were just submitted. They wanted you to have them. They're attached. One is it started out as a social media post, but it's a lot of research that a guy that's been a long time friend of the association, Don Yoakum, used to be with Frankfurt. He's pulled together an idea to replace regions with conferences and help with some alignments, but it's there. It's for your consideration. It doesn't really impact anything we're doing, but it does kind of try to bring community back into it instead of just stale region numbers. But Don's got a lot of research done, and that's in there in the public comment. The other thing is when the comments first started, 3 or 4 meetings ago about the transfer rule and potential amendments, the superintendent at Simpson County was deeply concerned about a one-time transfer. So he when he found out it's not even going to be planned on the agenda, he wanted to enter a letter into the record that simply states his opposition to what that would do. So both those, if you'd consider those public comment. And then the next person, we do have Superintendent Sherry Satterley from Frankfurt, and you have a team with you. And she was on the agenda for February and January or February. And if y'all remember, it was quite the snow day. So they were trying to decide what they were going to do pre-flood with the problems in the community. So just so you know that we deferred that till today, and we've invited them to come and whoever you want to come down. And this is a presentation about potentially leaving the 11th region. The staff's going to make sure you have one. We're far enough south. They're well trained. The gentleman straight out of seat. And Sarah. Really, superintendent sit in front of me and
Welcome.
here we go.
I'm Sherry Satterley. I'm the superintendent for Frankfurt Independent Schools. So thank you for having us today. I have with me my board chairperson, Gina Greathouse. This is my current Frankfurt High School principal, Thad Elmore. He is moving into a district level position next year, so we are currently searching for our next principal. We interview next week, so fingers crossed. And this, most of you probably know Amy Duggan. She is our athletic director. So I think you have my slide deck attached, maybe. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Just a little bit about me as a presenter. I'm very honest and very transparent, so just bear with me if I say things that that's just how I am. I don't know how to be any other way. So our goal in this was to come to the Board of Control, and we talked to our Board of Control members about possibly being moved from the 11th region to the 8th region for geographical purposes. And so you said Don Yoakum. So to us, he's known as Mac, and I think in Mercer County, he's known as Donald Mac. So he has a lot of different names, but I thought it was poetic that his stuff was on the agenda today too, because he shared all that with us. He did a lot of research for my presentation as well. But you can see a timeline there on my slideshow. I won't read my slideshow, but there's a look back in time as far as I think at some points we were in the 5th region, we were in the 6th region, we were in the 8th region, we were in the 11th, and then we were moved back and forth. And we won't talk about how those things happened, but Matt did a lot of research for us about what it has looked like through the years. I think back to 1922. So he's a great historian, and he does a lot of that for us. So just a little bit about our district. We are a preschool through 12th grade district with about 950 students, so very small. We have about 600 at Second Street School, K through 8, and about 350 at Frankfurt High School, which is actually high for us in recent years. So we are growing, but we don't have a whole lot of room to grow, so we're not going to get much bigger than we are at this time. And then there's a slide in there with what we offer as far as athletics, which we offer a lot of what your bigger schools offer, and we're actually toying with bowling and wrestling right now. So, those are possible considerations moving into the future. And then there are 2 geographic consideration slides in there, that show you where we're located in relation to 11 region counties, Fayette, Scott, and Madison. And then I put another slide that shows you where we're located in relation to 8 region counties. So you can see that we cross Woodford to get to most 11 region schools, and Woodford being in 8 crosses us to get to most 8 region schools. So it's just, we're kind of going like this geographically to get to where we need to go. And then one thing that Commissioner Tackett and I had talked about was what educational cooperative are we aligned with? So we are members of 3 educational cooperatives. We are members of the Ohio Valley, OVEC. We are members of Central Kentucky here in Lexington. We are members of KHSAA. If you look at the Kentucky map of co-ops, we are aligned with OVEC, which every other school in the OVEC co-op is in the 8th region. We are the only one that is not. And Jefferson County, of course, it's an anomaly over here. But Spencer, Gallatin, Carroll, all of those counties are in the 8th region. I kind of got ahead of myself. On average, we did an analysis of trip difference because right now in our region, we do only travel about 5 miles to get to Franklin County and Western Hill, whereas that would change if we were the only one. We would be traveling a little further to district schools, but on average, it would be about 7.9 miles, which to us isn't that big of a deal. It changed the geographic consideration for the entire region. A big piece for us, which I think this is the biggest piece for us, and that I want you all to hear, is the financial consideration piece. So transportation reimbursement for us in the legislative budget only reimburses mileage. It does not reimburse bus driver pay. So while travel to and from might be 7.9 miles difference, we all know that traveling from Frankfort to a Lexington school at 4:30 in the afternoon, even though the mileage might be less, the bus driver pay is not going to be less. I drive my son up here for soccer practice between 5:30 and 4:30 and 5:30 on weekdays, and I sit on 75 for quite some time most days. And most of our bus drivers at that point are in overtime because they're on 4-hour contracts and they've already gotten their 20 hours for the week. So they are getting time and a half to sit on a bus on the interstate on a trip that should, by Google Maps, only take 30 minutes, but it doesn't really take 30 minutes. On the second financial consideration page, you can see that we are the highest, right now, currently, the highest taxing district in the state of Kentucky at 107.5 is our tax rate, which is really high. I'm not sure what Franklin County's is, but it's in the 70s. That sound right? 70. And we have to do that because 76% of the property in our district is tax exempt. So of the $11 million in revenue that is out there, we get $3 million of that. The other $8 million, we don't see a penny of because it's general property. As we sit, we're not just in the city limits of Frankfort. Our footprint is much smaller than the city limits. So most of the property that's in our district is state and federal property. We're about 50% tuition because of that, because there's nowhere to live. So we don't have the revenue coming in another district. Our budget is about 12 million. Franklin County is about 65 million. So there's your big difference. And we literally watch every penny that comes in and out, and we cross every T and we dot every I because we have to. Now we are always trying to do everything we can to get money, to get in lieu of money for that, because the only way to do that is going to be to do whatever we can to dollar tax credits. And my board has historically taken the 4% every year because we have to prove that we are doing everything we can to generate revenue if we're going to get money from the legislature. So that's the biggest piece for us, and that's if everybody pays their taxes. $3 million. Not everybody pays their taxes. And we're not in a great spot with tax collection either. Our tax collector doesn't do a whole lot for delinquent taxes. They just get rolled from year to year. And on the third year of non-payment, you get a penalty. But after 3 years, are you going to pay it? If you've not paid it for 3 years, I'm looking at you because you're numb, you know? So that's the biggest piece for us. We just wanted to come to you and discuss the geographical consideration, which is important, and the fact that we are aligned with the districts in the 8th region, as far as educational cooperative, but the financial piece is huge for us too, because of what we're paying bus drivers to get to places that shouldn't take as long as they're taking. And just wanted you to see the situation that we're dealing with financially as we try to piece these things together. And our board is really wonderful about wanting to provide as much financial support to our student activities as possible. Our board right now pays for all transportation out of the general fund. Our teams do not have to fundraise for it. They do not have to pay for their bus drivers. They do not have to pay for their buses. We really don't want to get to the point where we have to do that, but we will if we have to, but we're hoping for our request. I did put 2 slides on here that just, I tried to anticipate any questions anybody might have. So one of the things I did was reach out to the other school districts in District 30, because that's the district that we would propose moving to, see if they support this move. I got a 50-50 response. I got yes from Anderson County and yes from Spencer County, and no from Shelby and a no from Woodford. Woodford superintendent is retiring. So I'm happy to ask the new one once they name a new superintendent. And then another question is, what about Franklin County and Western Hills? So I hate to say that they're not of my concern, but they are not in my school district. Great Crossing and Scott County are in the same athletic region, yet in separate athletic districts. And if you go a little further to northern Kentucky, you've got 3 high schools in Kenton County that are all in different regions. So it wouldn't hurt us. I don't know how Franklin County and Western Hills feel about us leaving, but it wouldn't hurt us to leave. I feel like we would probably still play those crosstown rival games just because that's what you do. I'm originally from Danville. I 100% get the crosstown rival thing, so I think we would definitely still play those games even if we weren't in the same district.
I'm not familiar with the district. What would it, if you left, what would that district look like when you left? It would just be 2 there. Who would still be left in that district?
In our current district, we've got Great Crossing, Franklin County, Western Hills, and Frankfort, Michigan.
So 5, 4.
There will be 4
There would be. Okay.
if the move was exclusive to them.
Okay.
It's a switch, it obviously changes it.
And one of the responses I got in response to that from one of the superintendents that said no was, we don't want a 5-school district. There are 3 school districts. I've looked at them until I'm blue in the face. There are different sizes all over the state of Kentucky, so it's not unheard of.
Questions?
To remind the board, particularly a couple of new ones that are coming on, was not an agenda item. It's a public comment to kind of get you thinking. Normally, basketball alignment changes are finalized at the January meeting, so there's a progression of discussion, and there will be opportunities to get the other schools in here, get Frankfurt back, if you decide you want to continue this. But we wanted certainly for Miss Eileen and her team to be able to express opinion.
A clarification, because you said that. I know that the big one is basketball. My ask is for all non-class.
Oh yeah, but I'm glad you phrased it as clarification, because the other team sports fall off of the basketball alignment. So yeah, it wouldn't just be a single sport. Good clarification. Thank you.
Thank you
very much. Thank you all. I hate to say this, but enjoy that 815 I-75.
Might stick around for.
We're on it all the time. Yeah, Mr. Davis from Brown. We signed up previously. Wherever you want to be, Matt.
So hi, my name is Matt Davis. I'm the athletic director at Brown, and our admin is a former degree before I got hired there. to deliver this message to you all. So I believe in this message, and but I'm here to deliver it all quick. I've been told there's no interest or appetite for this by the KHSAA right now. So start thinking about it. And it's probably a long shot. But here we go. I'm here to advocate for the expansion of the class system to other sports like soccer, volleyball, basketball, baseball, football. Our school has about 260 students in it, and so roughly about 120 boys right now, just to give you some idea how small we are. But we are fairly competitive in a lot of sports programs, you know, especially with their size. We made it to the final of region in soccer. Boys basketball is always right there, always, you know, win or two this year, maybe stay shy. Boys soccer programs, respectively, I think we beat male last year. We've had several consecutive winning seasons, and it's just a few things. Our volleyball teams 12, boys volleyball teams 12-2. They're going to play in the regional tournament this week, which is kind of helps my point here. And our other programs are pretty strong and continually improving. We have that ceiling there, and it's kind of demoralizing seasons when we get to the point of this district and state tournaments. And you know, I should know how to look this up, but I bet our athletic participation rate is the highest in the state. A lot of support from our parents. So I think it'd be doing a disservice if I address this issue. But like I said, end of the season experience for our student athletes ends in the same way just about every season. We'll have a fairly successful season. We get to the end, we'll play St. X, a team, school with 10 times the amount of boys and resources we have. Lose, and that's the end of our season every year. And then we have all of it, but it's not quite the same. You know, for example, our boys volleyball team Saturday will probably have playing St. X. Lose, go home. You know, we'll lose pretty soundly. And yeah, that's the end of the season just about all the sports. Not really revolutionary what we're proposing here. 48 other states already expanded this. I'm going to Maryville High School in Maryville, Tennessee. So when I got to Kentucky, it was a little different because they had already expanded and split public and private. And I thought it was, you know, I was kind of shocked when I got how it was set up. And we had tiny greenback high schools in my county where I'm from, and they're single-A, about probably Brown size. But then they win state championships in a lot of different sports, and it becomes a big source of pride in that community. And I just, you know, I think it's not about trophies. It's about having that at the end of the year experience where we can play other schools where any small school can play other schools like size and have that same experience that big schools have. And it's kind of currently the state tournaments in a lot of ways, you know, are currently reserved for those larger schools. And they're important, which is why we have them. And I feel like small schools like us miss out on those opportunities. So I just think smaller schools need this, you know, the student athletes at smaller schools need this as well, and it would drastically improve those experiences to them. And I think it's just also a matter of fairness, and just something to think about in the years to come.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And be sure and applaud the person that helped. I know put a lot of work into the data and stuff. Make sure.
All right, thank you.
Impressive. Leave.
Anyone else for public comment?
Abby, do you mind saying if anybody else is in the lobby? I hate if I close it. Abby, I wanted you to be the one to check for certain reasons.
You're lucky, Damon.
Okay, move on to legal sessions for specific items. Would you close session or
We do.
need a motion?
Charity
to
won't
close
be very
session?
long.
Motion to go to close. Odette, ready? We are in closed session.
Yeah, you-
Okay, move on to Number 4, items and reports. As you can see, there's a whole list of reports.
We need a motion.
I'm sorry, motion to come out of legal session. Right. Randy second. Michael was first. Randy second. Okay, back on to number 4, items for reports and information to the board. As you can see, it's listed. The operations, we'll go through, when we move these forward, we'll just wrap all those into one for the meeting. So,
Yeah, we're gonna have one big motion for all the reports instead of doing separate reports. We're trying to speed this up. This year's swim meet was managed by Ms. Brindle. Anything additional to your?
It was fun when we canceled out, but we didn't cancel it. It was slightly postponed. But,
Which means it fits right into most of your sports.
exactly. So we rolled right along, swimming went well.
You can continue with indoor track.
Yeah, indoor track, the second season, we went back to Norton. Partnership with Miles Wood and the way we did interesting things, woefully better for year 2. So stay positive, ads. Because they worked with us and it was so much smoother in year 2. And, you know, indoor track seems to be going well. We saw a big jump in participation, new schools having programs, as well as with the entries, we saw fuller, almost all the lanes were full. We didn't have scratches because they had to actually enter the kids that were in. So it went really well.
Questions? Sure, okay. Real quickly, basketball, the tournament, well, obviously we're really close to budget. We were a few $1,000s under budget for the boys tournament, which is wonderful considering 10 schools were on spring break starting that weekend. We know that's the reason we moved off of that weekend years ago, was to get away from the NCAA regionals and spring break. So we survived on it. The girls tournament attendance was actually up. We had a couple schools that drew pretty well. They didn't stay the whole week, but when they did, they brought a good crowd. One of the things, just for your all's information, because it does impact the board, is there's no planned renovation or change in the seating. SEAT eating of the arena for a while, which means we can kind of finally get stable on ticket sales. It's been kind of crazy the last moving people around, but I think it should be much easier. So other than that, the tournament was got what we needed, and other sports that were up will more than make up for a deficit we might have had or less than budget with basketball. It's supposed to settle that Monday and get all the bills from Rupp and and get the receipts that we didn't spend. But you got anything else on basketball? Wrestling?
Yeah, we had a pretty successful wrestling championship. We were able to incorporate a few things that work with the coaches association, like fog machines, old sparklers, and just trying to dress it up a little bit. It's very well received by fans and participants. It helps with the, pardon me, but limited maintenance and upkeep of the facility to dress it up a little bit. You know, we moved the boys tournament the year before. It was Thursday, Friday. Girls were on Saturday. This year, boys were Friday, Saturday. The girls event sold the same amount of tickets. Boys event being on the weekend, so 500 additional tickets. So all in all, went pretty well.
It's pretty much just now a steel and concrete box. They're not maintaining much of anything, but it is big. It has a lot of seats. Thank you. Archery. There.
Well, we this was the second year we moved from Bowling Green to here in Lexington at the Central Bank Center. I think that that's going to be a great relationship for years to come. They've been great. We and I mean Mr. Collins can attest to this. We certainly have leaned heavily on some of the local schools to assist us in setting up and preparing for that as far as tear up and breakdown. The actual tournament itself went well. You know, we had some interesting activities going on in some of the neighboring ballrooms, but I think we've developed a good relationship. We were pretty pleased with the way it went. I do know that Mr. Collins, Mr. Jack, and myself have talked about the possibility of expanding the teams that will come, you know, future based on the amount of space that we have there. And so worked fine.
Turns out having an event in an adjacent room only bothered Darren. It didn't seem to bother anybody else.
Well,
but we also for next year. Yeah, the rent. I will say
got
that.
me curious now.
it was a robotics war thing. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It wasn't like they were there playing chess.
It was loud and it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, it was interesting, but I can tell you that the rent in the Civic Center went from a little over 6,000 to 8,000. We know it's going up to 12 next year because we're going to get that third room, and we likely will be able to significantly increase the field coming in. And it doesn't seem to be a problem. That place works for that. It's a better maintained big bar. Yeah. So,
Is
Rob,
there,
I think,
real quick,
Yeah.
is there a new, are we supposed to address Mr. Bilberry in a different manner, after Sundays?
it's supposed to be called Medalist Bilberry.
Is he should I say Hall of Fame?
Yeah.
Member, Mr. Bilberry? Or is he, just making sure I'm addressing him properly now.
Just call him Bill.
Yeah, Bill Berry.
Keep calling me all the dirty names you've been saying behind my back all along.
The first time he attended a state board meeting, the chair addressed him as Bill Berry, so I'm the only one. All right, Rob, I think you're up.
Our most recent championship was last Thursday, at Cornerstone. That was successful. Thanks to Abby for the help there. It's as she can detect, it's kind of chaotic, but trying to keep all those kids and going there. But I always want to extend gratitude and thanks to University of Kentucky, Eric Jarvis, and all the team down there because I mean they do a lot. We're streaming to up to 6 Twitch channels now at one time. We have games, probably like 3 to 4 games at the minimum, 3 games going at once. But yeah, it's quite the event. I think we had 140, about 117 competitors, about 40 coaches. So DuPont Manuel, I think, did pretty well again there, David. And I think he's got some seniors though this year, so he's going to have to rebuild maybe a little bit. But yeah, it was great, a great event. I appreciate again all the staff that helped me out there.
Good. Aaron, I think you're next up this week.
All right. Tomorrow we'll be heading out. As you all know, you all formally approved the rotation as far as the Bass Fishing State Championship between Kentucky Lake and Lake Cumberland in Jamestown. So tomorrow we'll be heading out to get set up and begin the first state championship at Lake Cumberland. It's a new venue, so we had to do some more intensive work with the folks down there in the area. But I think we've got a pretty good plan in place. I think weather's going to cooperate for a change, and we're pretty excited. But I'll be eager to come back and report back to y'all how things went with it being a new lake and a new venue. And I like I said, just my level of anxiety is a little bit up just because it's a new area. But we've communicated well. I think we've got a good plan in place, and we look forward to having a good time Friday and Saturday. If anybody's interested and still needs some accommodations, just let me know.
Rob, I think you want to pull it, Darren.
I want to pull a Darren. All of our staff knows what that means. But I forgot to mention David Caps. Appreciate you for handing out trophies and making the presence there. So I always appreciate it. At esports.
Mr. Cope, I think you're
Just one thing in the written report is we started out with 70 boys volleyball teams and we ended up with 61 this year. So I think the fewest in a region was 5 and the highest was 9. So it was still pretty spread out. The tournament start tonight.
And that number will come into our discussion later as we talk about calendar.
And it might also too, you might get questions because we've already had inquiries from some teams that think they're going to be at the state finals in the state first round and it's the same for lacrosse too. The state first round is on May the 14th, and by mutual agreement, they can move that to the 15th. The second round is scheduled for May 16th, but if by mutual agreement there's conflicts or whatever, they can move that to the 17th. So there is some flexibility in there.
Madam Lacrosse?
Boys on boys side, it's gone pretty well. Honestly, I didn't know in here there. I don't know what the percentage is of disqualifications that gets me up in soccer levels, but we had a lot on boys side this year, mainly fighting. So I'm here for the party. I don't know. And the other issue we had was possibly a lot of decline assignments, and I'm new to seeing this, but I know Mr. Bottoms told me that it's just been abnormally an abnormally high number of declined assignments. So that's something I kind of want to look into in the off season. Like Mr. Coach said, we're starting postseason this week, and with regionals, the state first round starts next week. That's girls and boys, same dates as volleyball.
Lead right into the girls.
Girls, smooth the whole year. Obviously, I put in there, which we discussed a little bit, but there's a push to move from having 2 officials on the field to 3 in the postseason, but that's something that we would need to address in the regular season first. Those same dates are for state tournaments going to be the same for girls. It'll be in Shelby County and Collins in about 2 weeks.
For those that have been around the school business a while, we went through a couple of times during baseball umpire shortages where the local leagues were paying more or other levels are paying more than the high schools are. And then I think we'll find that's part of the decline piece is financially and closer by. But I think it's just they'll get used to a different system. It'll take a little time. But she's done a great job, and as I told her, she's taken a lot of verbal abuse and doesn't seem to bother her one lick. There you go, Leah. You got the next couple.
I know it's on the agenda later, so I won't dive
Yeah.
too much into it, but we're just not in a good spot with tennis right now. Whether it's the demolition of courts, version of pickleball, we just don't have the access to revenue that we had traditionally. Myself and several staff members went to Shiloh last week. That was one of our planned sites. Well, as of last week, they had no lines down, no nets up. So we decided, with all the rain that's coming in, we don't get stuck. We're going to move that event to Sayre for the individual. So the individual and doubles will be spread across 3 sites, which isn't ideal either. Spreading out staff, spreading out fans, and participants.
And then team tennis.
Same situation. I mean, we will be at UK and Sayre for the first day, culminating at UK.
Run.
State outdoor track will be back at UK again at the end of May, and yours truly, Debbie Beekler, will be at the award stand, and if you want to come help, she'll
Commandant Beekler will be reaching out.
certainly yell you into the right position.
All right. I think it's Darren. Anything else softball?
Getting ready to start the postseason. We'll be back at John Crop Stadium here at the University of Kentucky on June 5th, 6th, and 7th, and then the following weekend on June 13th and 14th. We've got a lot of postseason instructions that are literally going to go out today to the managers to get that started.
Just one thing I want to point out in baseball, because it came up at that AD conference a couple weeks back too, is that continual discussion of the use of a double first base, which is permitted by rule, by state adoption. So I think at some point we're going to come to the board for accepting permit.
Yeah, that's it's going to be part of the survey we asked. That'd be pretty good point.
Other than that, everything else.
Move on into the meetings.
Move on to the non-championship 4.1, the non-championship reports.
We have a couple of reports on the legal meeting, but I think mine is more pulled back a little bit, I guess, because I've focused a lot of the meetings and in between meetings up there dealing with states that are struggling with legislative interference or legislative involvement, shall we call it, and as well as pushes to change their transfer rule and make people more mobile. And it falls in line with the choice things. And we share a lot of information. It's a very valuable time. There's 4 times a year that the directors get together. And I'm telling you, there's some that are, it's really different. It's different right now if you're in South Carolina. It's different if you're in Louisiana. It's different if you're in Tennessee. There's some things going that we're still trying to stay below those bullets and have been able to so far, and it's a constant job. Some state associations are still dealing with the transgender issue. That was a big push. There's a couple of pockets of the country that still have a method of playing in your identified gender, and Kentucky's law took care of that for us, which made it it made it easier for us to avoid some of those arguments. Most of those groups right now are left alone to fight executive orders and other things that are going around because they're private nonprofits that aren't affiliated with government. So some of these state associations are really having trouble with that. And therefore, as Chad mentioned a minute ago, that their self-governance is sometimes coming into question. We spend a lot of time on our relationship with the folks in Frankfurt because they're elected by a whole lot more constituents than are in this room. So we have to kind of think about that I can remember one of the committee chairs telling me he's just tired of getting calls about this issue. Y'all talk about it. At least say you talk about it. And so that's important. The Federation is working on a document, which is the case for state athletic associations, and they accelerated that a little bit because, the concept of self-governance through the membership driving and staff serving to fulfill the policies developed by the board has worked for a lot of years. And so we're trying to protect that as much as we can. The other thing that seems to be continually talked about is various ways, and it's different for us because we only classify track and football cross country because we do track, but really track and football. Different ways of manipulating or altering the numbers used in classes based on population types, whether it's income, whether it's metro versus non-metro, whether it's where you draw your students. So many people now are implementing something where the percentage of students you have that live outside your district can equate you to being a non-public school. There's about 15 states that do that, where they increase the enrollment number for a non-public school to allow for the fact that they're drawing out of district. So to be equal with the publics, they make the publics, if you draw a certain number from out of district, increase. We've not had that long discussion. We've not looked at those factors, but that is something that's rearing its head all over the place. So, and then we got to do another session this year on AI because we're gullible. So I went ahead and did it, and Mr. Collins helped out. So, anything else you want to add on that one?
No, I think that is a good synopsis. I think one good takeaway from these meetings is that challenges that we find ourselves facing are not unique to just the state. It's something that's across the country. So the meeting does provide a valuable opportunity to states. So this meeting does help. I do think that whether by luck or not, a lot of very proactive things, the transition thing, in a good place with that. Not here with that is that we're going to fight that to the degree that some of these states are going to have $500,000 minimum set aside for league. Let's fight that battle right now. Lots definitely in the law the way it's
Anything you want to add to your report on the KSAA? I think that's next.
Yeah, no, there's a couple reports in there as it relates to I spoke to Cassie during Sweet 16, basically just giving a report and things that I'm staying across the country, but also school. So that's in there for the 80s convention. Yeah. So also spoke at the 80s convention. Information on legal liability, things that have been changing, and that really sucked because everybody at the 80s, they go there, see them enjoy it, they get a lot of interaction. And that's what we're trying to do. I think everybody up here went to that convention at some point. I think it's important to recognize they reach out to our staff because they want to hear from our staff. Staff is getting in front of those folks. 20 years ago, we used to go to all the rules clinics and we were in front of people face to face. Technology has changed the way we deliver those. It's good in an efficient way, but it's also important. The commissioner doesn't let us forget that we need to be in front of our athletic directors, relationships with our athletic directors.
I had the honor of the Empower Her Network with NFHS, and Abby and Jenny are both a part of that network. They changed how they structured it this year. They kind of put us more in groups instead of one-on-one. I've been a mentor, but I told them that's just because I'm getting old. I flipped to the other side. So, but I was the moderator of this, and they had picked some women to answer questions in athletic leadership. And I was just the moderator, but it was an honor to speak and highlight the accomplishments of those other women.
Getting old.
But I stick around
Better
long enough.
perspective there. I will say this because most of our staff tries to be very humble and opportunistic. But Mrs. Brian Ball's going to MC the NFHS Hall of Fame banquet this summer. If she was chosen to do that, so get her out there in front, you know. All right, Butch, anything to add on your management?
No, Dr. Parker's class who went and spoke to that. There was a panelist that we had a representative from the Lexington Football Club, from University of Kentucky, myself, from Traditional Bank, and all the questions they were asking about event management, budgeting, what do you do when this happens, insurance.
Okay. We did have the chance a couple of weeks ago. I know that David and Damon, Kelly, Mr. Zuber were there, and we were able to speak on Friday morning again, a session at the AD's conference, and kind of update the schools. It's always a good opportunity. They always, we usually are the first invitation they send out because they know that that's right before their lunch. So they have a good draw, and it's a chance to get messages out. And I think it went pretty well. There's a copy of the presentation in there, but when it comes on the KHSAA item, I've got a copy of that. But that's it's a good opportunity for our entire staff. And really, the value in it was certainly not the presentation. That's an old boring guy. The value was that they were there early and they were there late in the sidebar conversations, helping somebody one-on-one and making sure they were available. Several ADs were late getting into the luncheon because they were talking to our people. And so making them available, it's really critical. And so I think it helps the ADs group. You don't care?
Roll, yeah.
Well, any of you that have done facility construction at a district know that about the worst thing you can do is enter into a project that doesn't have a penalty for them being late. Well, we entered into this little thing you all approved without a penalty for them being late. And it has been as you would expect. We're about 2/3 of the way done. The kitchen piece is coming along. The design team of Howard and Malloy have kind of taken that thing and they've got it in really good shape. It's just now we're back to waiting on something because something else wasn't picked out in time and something else wasn't in on time. It's going to get done. By the time you all get here again in the fall, it will be done. Have to be. And so will the air conditioning. Interesting thing, you probably figured out, it's pretty good that somebody brought these because the air conditioner is working, but it's not working like it's supposed to. They actually took a temperature sensor and threw it down in ductwork to where if it senses outside heat, it's going to create air conditioning. So now we got nothing but air conditioning. So it's anywhere between 65 and 69 most rooms. So they've got it rigged up. They've done all the thermostats. They've just got to pull them all together and get the control board. The old control board had 4 units that could control all the communication. So it had 1 unit we used, and redundancy was on the other 3, replacement if it went out. We just blew the 4th one out with a lightning strike 2 weeks ago. So if it gets really cold, we got no heat. But staff has been very patient since January when this started with how it's gone. We did have, speaking of lightning strikes, we had another one and all that stuff that went around a week ago. Lost our fire control system, so that's being replaced. Thankfully, Cincinnati Insurance had already agreed to renew before we put those 2 claims on. So it's constant with it's hard to believe that it's hard for me to say this for sure. This is a 34-year-old building coming to 33, 34-year-old building. This is still called the new building to a lot of people, but its bones are showing some wear. To that end, I'll just point you to an item we're going to talk about. I know that it will bother you all to go out into the museum and have lunch in the future and not see the binder clips that Roy has holding the old wall together out there, but we finally got a proposal together to fix that wall. But and we'll have about 45 extra binder clips for sale. But it just wanted to update you just to where we are. Everything's going to get done ideally by the end of May, but it depends on supplies and all the things that, how do we say this non-politically? All the things that would have been subject to current tariffs were ordered before the tariffs went in place. So we got a little break there. That would have made a difference. we've covered, if you don't care, we've covered the legal meeting, I think, at all we need to. I think we're ready, if you don't mind, for Darren to talk about Title IX. Let's keep going through these reports.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, and Mr. Cashman can chime in because he's probably got some more knowledge in terms of the transitioning from our previous reporting system to what we're doing with Arbor. They've as I said, we've extended the deadline, which is typically May 1st to May 19th, to accommodate some of the changes that we're going through. I think we finally got some preliminary reports and had our auditors look at those just yesterday. I think that their response was pretty positive. And as far as the transitioning to Arbor and having the school report that way. But as I said, as a result, we've extended to the 19th, and that'll be the time, of course, that we fully expect all of our member schools to have those reports submitted and follow up with those that are a little bit delinquent on them.
And it looks like there's 7 sections in the new software for the title. It's basically the same software or same criteria and functions and whatever, but there's 7 sections. It looks like we're about, out of all the member schools, about half have worked on completed sections. I don't know the total that's completed everything just yet, but I know there's a bunch because they email me and they say, I can't submit yet. Well, they won't be able to submit it until May the 15th. But like Darren said, it's May 19th is the due date now. But every school can look at a preliminary report. He said Mr. Lawson and Kathy Johnston looked at a couple yesterday. I was like, well, compare them to last year's just to see if they look pretty close, and for the most part they did. It's the same familiar PDF report that's been generated for years, sort of. So that'll look familiar to the schools. It won't be too much shock. And I think Kathy had a meeting up at the AD's convention, a conference, a non-tech Title IX meeting, and she said the general consensus was everybody thought it was pretty easy to use. So I think Arbiter did a great job with that, getting that out there. So I don't know if any of the other ADs have noticed anything about it, but yeah, it's been good. It's been pretty positive.
I'll need to add, I'll be remiss if I don't, to thank Mr. Catford. I think his service to these member schools, not just in regards to Title IX, but everything we're doing in this transition has just been incredible. I know when I'm talking policy with them, but they say, but I can't do this. It's locking up. I can't. You got to talk to Rob on that. So, obviously I continue to try and talk with them about the policy side and those questions. The transition to this new system. Appreciate it.
And on the flip side of that coin, we've made it clear to Arbiter, yeah, you can support the schools. Like if Jim's got a question about the software, but any type of thing about the actual law or non-tech parts, they got to refer to our office. We don't want Arbiter answering those questions, and they're very clear on that. So that's good.
Leads right into anything else on the technology conversion. We just want to totally update them. Let's see, you got some decent news.
Yeah, we got the Triple Threat Awards yesterday. I guess y'all probably saw the email go out, so that's good. Actually, it's probably easier this year because we just dumped them in a directory. In the past, the athletic directors would have to go into a certain page and generate them themselves, but we just had Arbiter came in under the gun and got it done for us. Thought they looked great. I think there is 5,991 recipients. If you notice, if you remember, a couple years ago, we made it to where it's just 3 varsity sports in any season. So that increased their numbers somewhat. We kind of internally, we were like, well, do we count indoor track, outdoor track, and all that stuff? And we did. So if the coach thinks, oh, well, they shouldn't get it for indoor and outdoor, that's the coach's choice. They can say, well, but I think most will. I think that's it.
Well, I think when we put out our news release tomorrow about the triple threat, we'll point out the fact that with 2 new championships, things change. Team tennis was back new and indoor track is back new, so they're different things. So probably have some people that wouldn't have gotten it before, but when we went to 3 during the year instead of 1 each season, people got it that it wouldn't have gotten it. So it's obviously giving more kids opportunity for recognition. I looked this morning. 283, I believe, is the number of schools that have at least one person that's doing 3 sports. And so that's a good thing. that's it flies in the face of some of the people who, especially non-school people, who think you should play one thing all the time and nothing else, and that's what we want.
And I think, I spent Wednesday at the 80s conference and just to be there. And I think we're in a much better place this year than this time last year. Just for the fact that there was a lot of nervousness. Sweet 16 is a good example. Sweet 16 last year, a lot of schools were nervous, a lot of ADs were nervous. Seems like this year, I'd go up to some ADs that maybe didn't really like it last year. I mean, oh, you're not gonna kill me, are you? And they're like, no, we're fine, everything's cool. And it's just going to get better and better. We got a lot of things we've jumped track now to now that we're kind of getting Title IX behind us is the online transfer. So we're meeting weekly with them on Thursdays. We should see some stuff this week there.
And prophetic words from Mr. Couch a year ago have come true as we've kept you informed. There would be some extra first year costs. And but we're just thankful that we had a reserve that we could absorb those. And so we all approved them all, but it's been an interesting transition. We had kind of covered the KHSAA in the other reports. So I think with the transfers and the appeals report, if anybody has any questions, remember that's got individual names. So for the new members who are seeing that for the first time, those are subject to FERPA, so they're not released, but it gives you an idea of volume and stuff on the appeal side. Bylaw 11.
Yeah, the financial aid report, due in November. When we were here in February, I told you I wanted to follow up with those 4 schools. Got a couple responses. I did that and cleared those. There were no issues. There is one member school that did not submit the report, and that's Haven High School. And I talked to their AD several times, and every time on the phone, I'll get it today, I'll get it today. And as of, I was trying to log in real quick, but as of yesterday morning, it was still not good enough. So, but that's the only one missing. All other member schools survey for the 23-24 school year.
And now the analysis of those survey results starts.
No, I already did.
Yeah, see, well, we can survey get that there. So
yes,
you're not done yet. So the next item, this is just for everybody's edification. It's the second of a 3-year approved experiment in Region 15. I think something happened this year that hadn't happened before. We had an early round district loser end up advancing all the way to the state tournament. And that has caused a bunch of feedback from around the state. We talked about, we'll evaluate it next year, but and decide if you want to continue that approval or if you want to tell them they got to change some things. That's what we'll do that next year. But I don't know if you had any comment from up there.
Yeah, I'd be glad to report on it. I mean, I guess the response or outcry from everybody's been unbelievably positive. Any negatives I saw was from people at places that didn't understand the mechanics of how it worked or why it was designed. But as far as within the region, even the media, everybody has come back and said that finally we're seeing quality 15th region tournaments. You just had such a situation with this disparity because of having 2 3-team districts and 2 14 districts. It creates a situation, and that was one of the things. Even when the Lexington Herald reached out, different people wanted to just talk about what's the philosophy behind it. But the issue is in a 3-team district, obviously you can lose your way into the regional tournament, and it would have actually happened this year, the 15th. In the 60th district, girls Pike Central was the 1 seed, lost to the 2-3, and they would have never won a game in postseason and still advanced to the 15th region tournament. So that created, when that was going on, you were creating some unbelievably lopsided games in regional tournament play, where you have teams that really would never have even been, in competition, especially when you had 2 districts that way. So the philosophy in the beginning was to try to create equity between 3 and 14 districts while still preserving the exact format of a district and a regional tournament. So the idea of how we structured that by doing the first round losers coming together and drawing and created a first 4, sort of like the NCAA tournament does, and they would play those before the district championship games. And it created huge level of excitement. The fact that you were able to have some more competition. But the other side of that is it within our region, it made the district championship games really meaningful, and I've been through the years, you have sometimes both teams advance. And so sometimes you can get a better draw as a runner up, in a regional tournament, just depending on how everything falls. What this did was really put some significance on winning district championship, because those district champions didn't have to do that round. They jumped straight on into the round of 8. The district runners up hosted the teams that worked their way back. So basically by the time it was finished, you had an 8-team regional tournament that was very competitive. Teams had to win their way into the games. So what Lawrence County did this year was commendable. They had an absolutely unbelievable road to have to get to the state tournament. I mean, they had to go on the road and win a game, at our school at Johnson Central, then go and had to, play seemingly the most difficult path to get there. But even, Martin County, the team that they beat, who was the favorite in the finals, loved the format. I mean, I'm saying there was no, as far as animosity there. Now, obviously, 3-team districts are the 2 3-team districts would love to go back, but everyone else, I think, is unbelievably supportive.
Within the region.
Within the region, yeah. Like I said, and from my experience, once I addressed and talked to the people, even like I said, the guy from Lexington Harold called me there, Mark Story. We talked for a long time, and then once I explained, and to anyone I've talked to, once I explained, how that you could lose your way in the other way, and what the philosophy and how it's set up, it's unbelievably fair. Every single team has complete equity in being able to move forward in the region.
Well, what we'll have to do, this is just information. After the 26th tournament, you'll need to evaluate if you will need changes made. The feedback from multiple regions is no other 14 district could have a person lose the first game and keep going. So that's something you got to think about, because that's okay. But it kind of got high profile because their success.
And last year, nobody even.
Their success made it popular. But it is an experiment, and for regions that are contracting, first region it's down to 15 now. The 15th has basically 14, sometimes 15. And so in some sports, so that's the purpose here, is to let them experiment and see what works. That's why the next item, the 6th region, is doing that experiment, totally different experiment, more of what the board talked about originally with the experiments, which was eliminating the district tournament and just having a bigger regional. And that's basically what the 6th is doing. And I know Dave's been involved talking to Troy Johnson, who's leading it. Their stuff is there. They basically awarded the district trophies for winner and runner up based on seed position. So you played all year and it mattered, and they gave them the trophy. But they're having a big district or a big region tournament. So it's a different way of doing it, and that's why you wanted some experiments. It's not compare contrast. It's take a look and see. So they've been able to experiment. We just said we'd do a report, so we're making sure. Now, I know that the next agenda item he want to do here on 9:30-ish. Yeah. So we may want to see. I know the superintendent of Bowling Green was coming. This is their last time scheduled on the agenda for a review, and if it may be that we do another report and then come back to Garrett.
Yeah, we just whenever it shows up.
Yeah, you want us to go ahead so we can keep moving?
Yeah.
I know you're going to take a break.
Division, yeah.
Officials division, anything from either one of you, our outgoing director, our longtime associate?
I think the only thing is registration for this next year. We should be getting that open up here within the next couple of weeks.
Oh, yeah.
In the transition with Arbor. So if any of you get questions on that, our number of officials down a little bit in the spring sports, but not to the levels that it has been in the past.
It's getting more and more difficult for baseball and softball to compete with the local leagues. It's back to that again because the local leagues are paying more. So it's getting harder to get on property.
Can I ask a question? Because at our policy board meeting yesterday, we actually had baseball umpire come speak, and we've been hit very hard. I mean, with the ability to even get enough to cover games. And of course, it come up about how much more money a person could make calling middle school game and like a middle school B team game or whatever, or little, all those combinations of things. And also some of the umpires have declared they'll only do softball because they're so much quicker. And so it creates a situation that baseball is definitely on the outs of that. But I asked two things. One, I don't know if there's an accessible report real quick, or either it's something we could survey everyone. I told them I would report back what each of our regions were paying, for that, because we're trying to look at equity because we don't have enough officials. That was just one question. So I told them I would just ask if I could get that information at some point, but also try to look at other, solutions. I know one of the other things that come up, and I don't know which, as far as NFHS when they meet or discuss things, but what happened, and even the umpire yesterday made this also same point, is if you have two, I'll just say inexperienced teams playing each other, you can run into 3.5 hour games with pitch, a lot of runs being scored back and forth and no one's mercy, it creates some, and in our region there has been quite a few of those, I guess, games that have worked out that way with the time frame. Like our coach had said that he would be a proponent of or looking at. I don't know if that's something NFH has ever looked at to make more equity into time frame, because baseball is probably the longest competitive sport in some cases, of any of them that would ever be a time, like a game could not exceed during regular season, not obviously postseason or anything like that. Any types, I don't know. I just wanted that was just something that was brought up because it's becoming a huge issue because the umpires literally don't want to do baseball games because, and I don't blame them. I mean, because you're not, when you look at the time out on it. So I don't know. That's just something I thought I would ask, and I don't know what your all's response to that is.
Well, the first one, we have a baseball signer that keeps a pretty good tab on what the other signers are making. We can probably dig that up to Matt.
Great, thank you.
But the second one is this. I know that there's a solution. One of the problems is that baseball by the local policy boards has always been treated as non-revenue and very close to the vest in terms of expenses. And I know the second is really struggling to get games covered, according to Matt, at least, and get a pool of officials. Part of that may be fee that can be managed because there's more travel there. What happens is they can make more money staying working within 5 miles of their house, or the same money and not have to travel. And this seems to occur. How many times have we seen the studies that as gas prices go up, people all of a sudden baseball registration goes down? There's almost a correlation to it.
And then the time limit would be a federation rule change.
Yeah. They would have to give the states authority to enact something. Right now,
is that something we could ever propose just to see if that's something they would consider? Because I mean, during the regular season, I can't imagine very many coaches would have an issue if you have games going,
Well, I'll be honest, the coaches have been traditionally the ones that beat down any rule change about reducing their timeouts, which causes a lot of baseball delay, reducing their charge conferences.
And there has been rule proposals for changes for that on the charge conferences, limiting those.
Yeah, and the problem is in some respects the nature of the sport that if you put a time limit on it, it's such a. I'm just telling you from past discussion as a committee member, you put a time limit on it, you get into statistical aberrations. If it's only 3 innings but it's 3 hours, nothing counts. Complete games don't count. Wins. So there's always that mix of the stat buff and the guy wearing the clock.
Well,
and you talked about in your last clinic, this fact sometimes it's just umpires not keeping pace with it.
And I don't know if UK had a game this year where there was a time limit on starting the next inning, and kind of monkeyed with it to where the game ended in their favor. But you had that.
Yeah, they slowed down on games.
It's Major Leagues have just done the time between pitches, right? They put the clock up.
But in your kind of game, we see those all the time on the scoreboard. You can be within 10 seconds of delivering a pitch and still have a 15-14 game that takes a while.
Yeah.
But it's good that we definitely get you to sign it.
Yeah. I just told them I would report back to the policy.
I'm sure Matt's got
it. But it's a huge issue right now, probably worse than anything I've ever seen in our region.
I think Matt, when he was first having his shortage a couple of years ago, updated the pay for all of the associations. he kind of keeps a Google sheet on it.
Julie, what about the curriculum or the curriculum to add the junior official thing? Is there any statistics to that on how many schools are doing it? If there's any payoff or?
There's other states that have had more success with it, bigger states. Indiana's had a lot. I haven't seen any data lately. I know that we have 70 some or almost 100 junior officials.
Anderson County.
But in terms of, we can get that because we can find out how many schools in Kentucky have signed up with them. We could ask.
I don't
them.
know if there was an original email or something that you can share with member schools for us to put press. Sitting in a school and I would love to have the ammunition in my hand to go to my principal and say, hey, is this something we can consider adding to our school curriculum?
Yep. Yeah. We'll get that to you. We'll get that to all of you in case you want to send it out. Because Mr. Bottom's going to have a more relaxed schedule. Mr. Cope's got to pick up that duty for a little while. All right. Do we want to?
Let's finish up the officials.
Okay,
and Bowling
good.
Green.
List of disqualifications. Congratulations, Abby, on moving up the standings. It's the by sport totals for lacrosse continue to go. But that's in there. And then we did finish the news release part of the situation yesterday. We had some internal communication issues where we were waiting on something we shouldn't have waited on. So we've announced all of our officials of the year for the sports that have finished so far. And I think you'll see there's some geographic balance. There's all kinds of opportunities. So really want to recognize those folks. And if you can, do you want to go back and then take the
Yeah,
break?
like the superintendent down here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gary, welcome, sir. Mr. Fields, excuse me.
Oh, Gary Stock.
I guess,
Circle back to Bowling Green.
we've called each other worse than that in our younger days.
That's right. That's right.
All right. Gary Fields is superintendent at Bowling Green Independent. They have been a regular spot on our agenda through a joint agreement that they were going to report how things are going. Kyle McGraw, their principal, has done a really good job of communicating with Joe, who's our staff liaison, and we wanted to have, we talked about them coming, and Gary said he himself wanted to come. This is the last time that they're scheduled to be on the agenda.
Well, good. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here today. Hopefully it's my last visit. But we've spent the last 3 years, once we had the agreed order, to really work on making sure that we had a very tight athletic department as far as trainings, as far as rule enforcement, just kind of how we run our athletic department, I think, in general. And I know Mr. McGraw has done a great job of communicating with you at each board meeting. And Calvin Head, our athletic director. I will let you know that tomorrow we will be announcing we are finally, we're probably slow for a district our size, but we are going to have a district athletic director that will be named tomorrow. That'll be a full-time position that'll oversee all of our middle school and high school athletics. That will be compensated as a director position for the district. You all know these athletic programs have gotten very big, and we need somebody who is on that constantly, and he's going to have, or this person will have a lot of support underneath them. Here we have a pretty good candidate, so hopefully he didn't mess up the interview. A result of, I think some things that have come out of this that have been very beneficial, and other districts might find this. Our coach's handbook. I think we've developed a really tight and efficient coach's handbook that really puts everybody on the same page, beginning every school year. It's easy to maneuver. Calvin and Mr. McGraw have worked really hard on that to make sure they have access to all the information that a coach needs. And we've been very fortunate. We have a lot of veteran coaches, head coaches at least. But like many of you, our assistants turn over frequently, especially our parapros and volunteers. And so it really gives us an opportunity to give everybody a starting point with a coach's handbook that applies to Bowling Green Independent Schools, especially being an independent school district. Coy experiences this, Russell, others. We have a lot of non-resident students, things like that. It's just a little different animal. We have to make sure we handle it properly. I mentioned the district AD position. I think the training for all coaches, especially the assistants and volunteers, has been critical, and we're going to continue that. I think in the past we did a good job with head coaches. I think we did not do a very good job with all the people that assist. And part of the reason why I'm sitting here today is some of those positions that were assistant positions and volunteers and parapros. So by bringing everybody, so we don't let anybody on the field. We had one volunteer coach who was a local doctor who was not thrilled to have him to show up to a training, and it was like either you show up or you don't coach, and it's become the norm for us. So everybody's hearing the same thing, so no one can say I didn't know that. I didn't know that was procedure. And I think the final point, which I think kind of brings all this together, and I don't know how your schools are handling this or if it's an issue, but we constantly have families reaching out to people about coming to our school district, and that's just the new norm. And I think we all should, we all have to acknowledge that. We have a really tight procedure of if anyone is contacted by a parent, a student, a student athlete comes to a coach and says, hey, so-and-so says they want to come visit Bowling Green High, we have a policy. You go through Mr. McGraw. It all goes through the principal. So everybody that any potential future student, no matter if they're an athlete or non-athlete, must go through the principal. Mr. McGraw sets up any potential visits to the school, and we have a lot of people visiting this time of year. Once again, in our elementary schools, middle school, high school, many of it non-athletic related, but it protects us with the athletes. And then if a student comes in and does a visit, the parent indicates that either they're an athlete or interested in playing sports. At that point, he brings in Calvin Head, our athletic director, to explain the process. And that has really helped us a lot because, as you know, everybody in this office knows, people do not understand the idea of transferring schools. And really, it helps us kind of head off a lot of things. It convinces people to stay where they are. Coach Head has an opportunity to say, you're not going to be eligible if you come to our school district. And that normally convinces a lot of people just you need to stay where you are and enjoy that experience. And so I think that procedure alone has, over the last 3 years, has really eliminated a lot of headaches for us. And it keeps, we're all fighting a lot of silliness and, people making a lot of bad decisions. And so by having Mr. McGraw and Coach Head control that, that has been really beneficial. So I would suggest that if you don't have that policy in place, and that policy is for, everybody hears that, from guidance counselors to parapros to volunteers to head coaches. That is the policy. They call to the central office. That's the policy. You go through Mr. McGraw. And it's a lot on him, but he's a young guy. He's handling it pretty well. So. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Anyone?
The only thing I had, you plan on continue tracking kids that move into feeder pattern? I know that was part of it. I think that's a great idea to continue that. Yes, we're going to continue that. And, it's really worked with us because once House Bill 563 passed, this all coincided with this all beginning. The sense was we weren't going to have to track non-resident students because we didn't have to lottery and the agreement with Warren County. This has helped us continue to track that with all students, but especially athletes. So we are going to continue to track that. And it just helps us with home addresses. Where's everybody living? If they're, we get a lot of that too, where people not telling the truth about where they live. So.
What kind of time management burden is that on Mr. McCraw? Because that seems like a really good stopgap measure and optics from ever happening. But how much of a burden is that on?
I think Kyle's embraced it. I think the biggest thing for our district is, we have, about 25% of our students are non-resident. So, our ability to continue to grow, we were the third fastest growing district, grew 7% last year. Was based on non-resident enrollment, just based on how Warren County is growing. So Mr. McGraw wants to give those tours anyway. Mr. McGraw, wants all students. We have, not just athletes coming to visit. We have musicians. We have, scientists. We have all different kinds of kids who have different interests. So it just puts him in control of that. We know what the message is. We know we're going to tell them, what we are and what we aren't. And so it just made it real consistent. But it is a time commitment, but he's committed to that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, this time I think all the reports over. Let's take 5 minutes. Biology break.
We're down to, and we'll pick up with that.
Ready to roll? Okay, we left off at 4.3 finance and business. First order would be the TPG with Ms. Hackett.
The Queen of TPG.
Hey, morning, Abby. You're late for class.
Oh, and it's not just the lacrosse people giving it.
As I mentioned last time, we obviously it's been a successful year, hitting 4.4, so really excited with that. We will probably end up finishing the year at 111% to goal. We do have a couple proposals out that might fall into baseball and softball. If we get those, that would be fantastic. If we don't, we are still in a good place. Just to give you kind of a perspective of how the growth has been, it's been a 32% growth from 23-24 to 24-25. So when that happens, obviously our goal for 25-26 is increased. So it's a lot larger, but we are in a good place for that too. So because of the way we strategically placed our contracts and being multi-year, we are currently sitting at 39% for 25-26. One thing that happens in this world, in this space, is you stagger your renewal contracts. And so we do have a couple big partners that this is the year for their extension conversations. So that's Clark's Pump and Shop and Morgan & Morgan. So once we have those meetings, they are all very happy and positive. So I'm not worried about the renewal. It's just how do we get an upsell with that? And because that's always our number one goal is when we do an extension is to add more inventory, get that upsell. So once those cross the finish line, we'll be close to 50%. As for our team, we're really focusing on spring activations, the logistics for all the activations, working with the KHSAA team on these upcoming championships. We also are still doing our proof of performance meetings. And as I mentioned before, that's a huge piece of this, right? In our partnership building. So we do proof of performance presentations after all our championship swings. So we've done a lot of post basketball presentations with people, especially, this meeting that we'll have with Clark's Pump and Shop will be that's an important meeting. Not only are we showcasing what we were able to do at girls basketball, but they have 3 entitlements in the spring with baseball, softball, and track and field. So those are when we show pictures. We have a lot of pictures, as many of you guys know about me. So we take pictures of proof. We also show the data, the impressions, and just make sure that we close it with a shiny gold bow with it. So they're excited to continue their partnership. So once we get these renewals in, we'll be in a good place. Our big goal for the year is to be finished by Halloween of 25. And so that is something that normally what happens with our team, our TPG encourages, they do a mid-year type of promotion. So there's, for the past 4 years, we've been able to, 3 out of the 4 years, we've hit goal before the new year. So this year, I'm putting a little more pressure on our team, and that's Zach and Sal. I know many of you have seen them and met them. So we need to make sure that we get it sooner this year. And that will be the first time in TPG history for that. So other than that, we are looking for new people. We're looking for new partners. I always appreciate folks if you guys have leads or relationships with other people and corporations and industries across the state. We have several new business meetings coming up that we're really looking forward to. And I think that's another positive for adding a third person. Sal does a really good job at doing the research, prospecting, locking in the meeting. And then depending on the situation of how many people are in the meeting or who is, what representative for that company is involved, then all three of us will be on there. But then we continue to maximize our time and use it efficiently when I can be meeting with other people while the fellas can do the same, so.
Questions?
Questions?
I have,
Sorry.
I have one question. You had leadership from TPG in to one of our tournaments. Do they have reactions or comments to you?
Yes, so my immediate supervisor, he's our senior VP, and so he's over all the states. And just so you know, we just added Kansas, so we are at 36 different states across the country. So there's, again, I like to tell people this, Kentucky is in the top 2 of those 36 states of revenue generated each year. He had amazing feedback. I've over the past 3 years have been very proud of what we've been able to do here. So they have seen it, with a lot of pictures and ideas that we have in our weekly meetings, but to actually be here and present, it was definitely great feedback, and part of that is I'm going to be wearing a couple other hats this year with the company. So part of that is taking the ideas and inventory that we've created here in Kentucky and be able to mirror that across the country. Everything from the event itself, from utilizing Rep Arena to the fullest, the opportunities that we allow our teams and coaches and hospitality. A lot of other states are not maximizing that. So they really look at Kentucky and the Sweet 16 events as a premier level that they hope to spread that experience across the country. So I keep telling them more and more people need to come and experience it from our company.
What else? Again, if you have corporate leads, feel free. We'll put you in touch. Butch, anything you want to add at all? Thank you, Ms. Acker.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Cool. Move on to 4.3.2, quick review of staffing holiday.
Yeah, this is just a report. We've been working with KHSAA on our agreement with them. They service our payroll, but it's real important. And they said, especially as people stay here and get longer in the tooth, it's important that their benefits are going to be better if they retire from here. So we're trying to make sure we've got clean separation. That's going to mean we're probably going to take another holiday, which the staff will laugh because I complain about the existing number. But going back to the state holidays, which is an additional holiday than what we're getting right now. So it's going to be employee friendly, but we're just making a little cleanup there, and we'll give you copies of that when we get it done. It's really just for information. It's going to be very employee beneficial, thankfully. Those of you should have gotten an email in the last week that are it's your turn to go to the NFHS summer meeting. As I said, the hotel is probably the thing we want to work on earlier, but Kara's working. She's got a block of rooms. We're going to try to get everybody in the 28th and out the 2nd, and then she can help you with deviant dates based on the form. Anything else for them?
Contact at the hotel the NFHS is using for the summer meeting in Chicago. I've been in communications with her, so those of you that are going, once I can get confirmation numbers, I will send them to you, and then you can adjust your dates as far as when you are checking in and checking out. But I'm trying to go on and get your room solidified and booked, and then you can adjust your dates and units.
As of the note I sent you all the other day, they're pretty comfortable right now on availability, but it's really tight on Saturday. So you've got a form to fill out for us to let us know you're coming or not coming. If you already know you're not coming, just send that in, and that way she can follow up, and we'll make sure that staff keeps in touch with you. Like we've got 10 eligible, and I've already had 2 say they can't go. So good. Mergers and splits, just a little update, and I put an article in there because ironically our 2 schools that are building new building for merged schools were impacted by the the sudden shut off of funds from the federal government. You'll notice in that article, the Christian County Schools and the Carter County Schools had some things related to their project on their merger. They're still hopeful that they're going to get that funding, but we don't know. We won't know for a while. So just as long as you're aware, there's no issues here now. There is, is that in another area? Do you remember, Sarah, on the school, North Hardin Christian?
What is it, what?
I just can't. We'll go ahead and mention North Hardin Christian and skip it if it's later, but we got word this week that they are withdrawing as a member. So we'll process all of that. They're going to go back to just being a member of that non-public KHSAA, I think it is. So they'll go ahead and do that. And then the last thing is just some items from around the country. There's lots of articles because it's been 3 months instead of 2. Kind of separated them a little bit this time. There's several states going through a lot of things. Alabama's legislature seems to really want to be involved with Alabama now. They've had a little bit of turnover. They're in their third executive director in the last 5 years, I believe, and they're a little bit vulnerable right now. And there's a lot of things going on in Alabama, so that's why there's several of those. It's also an interesting study the Federation did, one of those charts of the 12 states that have one-time transfer. And the interesting piece is, as we started looking at that, we're preparing for the legal meeting presentation and a couple of other things, we found out that everybody defines that differently. So they may one time, but they don't tell you what all they got to do. And it's not the same everywhere. So be sure you note the details. There's a case in that first group, case involving the New Jersey Association, that's quite worrisome to most of the states. It's actually where a circuit judge got involved in a disqualification to the extent that disqualification of a competitor, to the extent that he ordered the competitor back in and admitted the kid did what the association accused him of doing. Went to stands and started a fight after a wrestling match. So it's just one of those getting in the weeds that the judicial branch doesn't normally do. So we're watching for that one. Just keep an eye on that one. That's going to have some long-term things. A few articles have come out, a lot of the present companies included in their articles that they came out following the discussion on transfers, et cetera. There's the joint resolution we've already mentioned did not pass the Senate. South Carolina and Tennessee are in a very tough position right now. Their members at first refused to try to change some things, and their board kind of refused to kind of change some things. So the legislature came back and said, yes, you will. And they said, well, give us a chance. We'll go back and reconsider. And now their future is kind of in doubt as an independent association. Tennessee's takeover, so to speak, was to take place late this month, and they've now deferred it. The last I read was they will reconsider that at the first day of the next legislative session in 2026. So they've given them a year or 6 months, 9 months to try to do some things. And South Carolina's in a really tough position. So we want to keep you up related on those. And there's quite a bit of information about states that are having trouble with either Title IX or transgender policies. So that's more, and for those that are seeing these things for the first time as new board members, that every meeting will give you stuff. We'll have half of you read them, half of you probably don't, but it's a library of what's going on and what generates a lot of the things we come back to you with. Is we want to try to not be on this list. So at this point in the regular meeting, you would take, Matt's doing both roles, so it's easy today, but you would take one motion to all those hour and a half worth of reports. We kind of shorten, we're trying to make it easier on presiding.
5 items for review for possible action at a later meeting.
And I think it's important to note that when we looked at the agenda and we met with the officers, none of these are final items for today. So and I know that we have 2 of the best journalists in the state here. They're going to be sure and point that out. Even if it's talked about as a possibility for the future, it is not happening today. That's what that section's for. And the first one is a question for the board, and it's an operational thing that's coming up around our championships. In our partnership with the Lexington Convention and Visitors Bureau, which is now Visit Lex, I guess, they have traditionally reserved rooms. So they have hotels, as you can see from this communication, that for next year have already held rooms for our state tournament teams in basketball. And I'll tell you the history on the others in a minute. Both boys and girls. We have an increasing number of teams that don't really care where they're assigned. They're going to stay where they want to. Technically, they forfeit reimbursement for their lodging if they don't stay where they're assigned. That's the only carrot you've got. These people have held hotel rooms at an $80 rate in a hotel that's about 160 at most places during those 2 weeks. So we think it's a service, but the question is, does the board want to keep doing that? Do we want to really keep assigning specific teams to specific hotels, or do we just do it catch as catch can? And those of you that are within driving distance of Lexington, if I'm at Clark County or Fayette County, probably not an issue. Your teams aren't going to stay overnight anyway. But we were always told that by helping the schools with at least those few rooms, it was a big help to them. But now we just have a number of people. It's helping us. They're taking less expense money. But at the same time, we've got these hotels now left without rooms. Not always very happy about that. Or left without rooms sold. They've got to try to sell. But we want to continue getting them the block and try to help. Or do we just want to get out of the hotel business?
If I
Have you been there?
Just from what I've heard from people in our area of the state about that from different schools, I think that, and I don't know if this is even possible, but I think the reason on some of those cases is, like I said, some of them have certain places they're used to staying at. But I think the other part of it is, I mean, if you went and looked up the star ratings on these hotels on this list and their average scores, there is a vast difference on where you might get assigned. On some of those, if your region gets signed, I mean, I've had some coaches go, I'm not taking my team to that place. They had bad experiences before. They were not, I'm not trying to knock any establishment, but I'm just saying that, and you can look at those. I mean, a couple of those are pretty new establishments, I know, and are a higher grade level of hotels. So I think is problematic because we're not in control of that. That's between them and the hotel. So to me, I didn't know if it's possible just to say, because I don't know what we're, as far as setting that up and allowing for expenses and stuff, just to say you get X dollars towards housing in your reimbursement, just to, like equivalent to whatever that we're paying out or less, whatever the board would want to do, but say, this is what you get. And here's a list of of hotels you may try to reach out to, but us not assigned. I don't know. That's just what feedback I've got.
How big of a problem is it? I mean, do you have multiple schools that just don't do this, or is it one?
6 this year? I think 6 out of the 16. So 6 hotels were left holding rooms. One of them is a pretty good hotel, but the AD at the school just has a great relationship with this particular hotel over across from Fayette Mall, and they're going to go there for football. They're going to go there for girls basketball, boys basketball. I don't even want to guess what the schools will end up paying for the boys tournament. It's a supply and demand problem.
And like baseball, softball, in the spring, you've got Railbird that's going on here in town, and those hotel rooms are $200 and $300 a night now.
So the first weekend, they'd get a $200 or $300 room. The second weekend, when Railbird's not here, they might get a $100 room.
And we ran into that on softball too. It was bad. Yeah.
So
That's the problem. If they wait until they win the region to try to get a block of rooms,
they're at the mercy of the hotel.
Exactly, because most of those are already going to be wrong because people are getting the rooms.
And our expense reimbursement is not meant to be a reimbursement, it's an allowance. Because there's never been a team make the state tournament that the bandwagon didn't increase so much that they know they're not getting all their money back. They've got regional receipts. A lot of the regions do the smart thing. They kick in an extra share for the winning team to help it travel. That's smart. But we feel part of it is legal in that in some of these cases, we're signing contracts with these hotels and then these teams are backing out. We've never been pushed on that, but you're not going to find very many $80 rooms. And there's some of these hotels you probably say aren't worth 80, but you go stay tonight.
Oh, they're still,
they're 140. Yeah. So that's the problem is it was done as a service to the schools.
So
but I just told the guy to visit Lex. I said, well, just see what we can do.
If you stay at, I was fortunate enough way back when, it's been since Bowling Green that we won a region and anything, but I will tell you that athletic director's already got enough to do versus trying to find some hotel rooms.
That's right.
And if We won the state championship in 2012. We stayed at Super 8 Bowling Green and had a great time. So, but I was told you stayed at their designated hotel, and that's what we did. So what happens in that scenario if you don't stay at the designated hotel? Do they not get their reimbursement, I'm assuming, or they do?
They don't get the reimbursement for housing, and their per diem for meals is reduced to as though they're traveling.
Can that money be redirected back to the original designated hotel?
Well, if we ever got into a legal argument, that's probably what we'd have to do.
Why don't you just penalize the school? If you don't want to stay at your designated hotel, you pay
Yeah.
the hotel you were assigned to.
Well, and that's the problem is a little bit jurisdictional in that they didn't, the team didn't sign the agreement with the hotel. So it's really, worst case, it could be us doing it.
What is it? What's the norm like? Those 6 teams that didn't stay. Great Crossings. They're just right down the road. George Rogers.
They're outside of 40 miles, so they don't have to stay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I didn't know how the local teams handle that when they make a state tournament. If you're within 50 miles, do they drive back home after a game, or do they use the hotel? Or
Well, we had a local team over on Fontaine Road one time that some of their fans used the hotel, but they at least used the rooms. We don't care who checks in. The players and coaches wanted to sleep in their own beds, so that's where they stayed. But they at least booked the rooms and met the contract a lot. And I think it's 12. It's almost 12 rooms. But for schools, I know that the school that stayed out across from Fayette Mall, their rate was around 140, and they didn't bat an eye. They want to do it. We had a school in near Knoll School that played in the girls' tournament 3 or 4 years in a row that always stayed at Griffin Gate and pay a higher rate and didn't get any reimbursement. They just chose that. So the question, we're trying to figure out if we need to be in that business. We're trying to support the convention bureau, but at the same time, if this hotel can sell walk-up rooms at a higher price, why should they hold them 9 months, 12 months in this case, and then get stuck with them?
Is it an all or nothing, or is there a formula that we can kind of?
We just adjusted that formula 2 years ago on what the teams are paid.
Well, I'm
to
talking
try
about
to-
like
to-
in terms
to get
of
that.
like how many teams take advantage of it. Like maybe we only reserve 12 hotel blocks
Yeah.
and just bank on 4 not using.
Well,
them,
he
right?
keeps that in, John actually does that, which is that's their business, is to visit Lex people. But they will sometimes, when they know there's been a region that doesn't stay, now they track it, they won't assign a team, they'll book for 2 teams, but only maybe 18 rooms because they know this one's probably not going to stay. They handle that through the reservations. They've got that data and they use it a lot. Football is a different story because football is at a time of year there's always availability. I mean, 1st of December, there's not much convention business. So John's been able to find them. And still, one of Coy's neighbors, who had their superintendent on the board for a while, they're just the opposite. They don't care where they're assigned, but they need like 62 rooms. So they never were able to stay at the same hotel because they brought everybody to stay together. And then but then everyone, the cheerleaders, stay at the same room, the same hotel.
Can we designate this job to the region and let the region work out the hotel block that many months in advance, and then the region's responsible for the hotel block that the team has to stay in?
Some of you have managed a regional tournament. What do you think?
I think there's some scenarios where your region, depending on who wins, you could have a team who's very close to Lexington and they win the region. But also another school in that same region was to win. They need to stay overnight.
Well, we've got teams backing out of the blocks now.
But I think
shifting the burden.
Donna's dealt with this more than I have recently, but I know if you win a region on a Saturday night and you play on Wednesday and you got 1,000 things you're trying to do and try to fall down to Lexington or Bowling Green and get a block of room for your team, I think the bullseye should be back on the teams that aren't fulfilling the obligation, not the rest of us that wanted to stay the way it is.
And that's the board that felt, that's why they said, just don't pay their travel. They make their own decision.
Right.
Yeah.
now is it
Kind of screws the hotel.
both tournament girls and boys, or is there one that doesn't use rooms more than another?
I'll answer that 2 ways. There is one that uses the rooms more than others, but I'm not sure that this body would be smart to separate those and make a perception difference.
Sure.
That's your issue.
I just wondered.
No. It is. You're right. They did. They almost all use them for the second tournament.
Let me ask you this question, this might be a bad question, I'm not sure. What if in your membership subject schools, you have them grant the board power of attorney to reserve those rooms for them in lieu of, them winning a regional tournament? And that way it puts the burden back on them because they've actually granted you the right to reserve that room for you.
Yeah, I would go at it a different way and make that a requirement of membership is the way I would look at it. But it's a really tactical question about whether or not we really want to be wading into that water.
Well, here's one of the issues that's almost unspoken, but the convention bureau has mentioned it more than once. There are a significant number of hotels that are more than willing to help us at every other event. And when you get to an event that might generate more followers than the little team block, and you've stood them up, what's their incentive to help you the rest of the year? And that's something that has to be considered a little bit. I mean, I get it. The funny thing is, I'll just be honest with you because I've seen it happen. The exact same kids playing on a travel soccer team tournament or travel volleyball team tournament or other baseball tournament be more than happy to stay in the same hotel they're critiquing because of the number of stars during the basketball game. Absolutely. They'll stay where they're staying. And some of them have to stay. There's this pay to stay stuff is for real. People are tournament organizers are holding people hostage. So what I'm trying to do is keep it from coming down on us. But because we need these guys when they get running the spring championships over a whole bunch of weekends, they need that list of 4 or 5 hotels that they know are going to make rooms available for our teams first and foremost. And it seems like there's a little bit more of a hoity-toityness to the 2 weeks in March as far as people being picky.
I just say 2 things. One, I think that what we were even talking about a little bit here. I would say that if nothing else, if first of all, hotels all pretty much have the 48-hour, even during the state tournament, I'd reserved some rooms and I even went back to check mine because I wasn't sure before, like for some other family coming in, and you still have the 48-hour cancellation. I mean, that's usually pretty standard on a lot of things, which would fall within the time of winning your regional championships. I don't know as far as getting into legal situations. I mean, hotels have those cancellation policies already intact for regular customers. I'm just saying, so that's probably why they're not giving you a lot of kickback, on that. But the other thing would be that maybe if the Visitors Bureau would just rotate those hotels a little more frequently on their region assignments, because the issue is I've had some people say, look at this, you can look at the disparity of which regions get certain, better hotels every single time and others aren't. So I like I said, I'm just restating what several coaches have told me.
They've got erroneous information. You want to clarify?
Okay.
They rotate.
It's been a rotation for 15 years.
Okay.
They know the politics of that. They know when the 7th region had the Griffin Gate one year and didn't the next. They heard about it. They know that. That's a planned practice. But let me give you one note about cancellation, because in all honesty, that's not the way it is in any group contract. You got a much further out that you get to pull out. So I get it. I mean, I get it. I just, what I don't want to do is let us appear with the convention bureau. They're trying to help us as giving our schools a cop-out reason. So if we don't need to be involved in this, let's get out of it. If we need to stay, if it needs to stay the way it is, fine. It's buyer beware, so to speak, with the hotel, whatever you all think. I just don't want it later on affecting all the other events. And that we got a pretty terse response from one hotel. She was new, but got stood up for 2 straight events, and she decided that she was just not going to participate anymore. And John had to go have a talk with her and her GM that got her talked off the ledge. But when you're dealing with positions, you get paid commission based on contracts that are fulfilled. I get why they're upset too. That's why this wasn't down for action. We need to hear some feedback.
I like that it's a service to our schools.
Yeah,
that it's
that's
not
the reason we started.
Yeah.
Is that something the regional tournament manager could get involved in? Since they're local and kind of have a feel for all the schools in their region.
Feedback to us, you're saying? Give us feedback.
Finding out and maybe being the conduit between KHSAA and their region and say, yes, we want the rooms.
Yeah.
And then talking to the folks and saying, hey, if we get the room, we're gonna use them, because they do get paid a little something. I don't think they get much, but they, for managing each regional tournament. So,
I've run the 7th and 6th region tournament for probably about 15 years. You don't know. I mean, you might suspect who's going to win. I'm just telling you, whoever wins the tournament is going to dictate how many rooms are they going to stay? How many rooms are they going to take? If St. X wins the region, I bet St. X took a bunch of hotel rooms. If Evangel would have won the 6th region, I think they were in the championship game 2 years ago. We saw the crowd at Sweet 16. They probably would have took half of the allotted rooms. The regional managers have nobody steps forward and says, nobody's begging to be the basketball regional manager.
No, we can't
To
get
add
all
one more
that
thing on their plate, I don't think it's a good idea.
well, I'm just saying, you would still have to reserve them out, but at least you could communicate and say, hey, folks, here's the deal, and talk to everybody and see if there's buy-in to use those rooms, whoever wins.
Is there a declaration date? Is there a deadline date that you have to say we are going to use those rooms? Maybe that's the answer. Is like, hey, on Sunday.
But the problem is the people that committed to the room sale don't work on Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
They're usually the weekday person. I mean, it's a logistical issue. It's not something you're going to fix with. I mean, that's why we post that list as soon as we get it. We post it publicly. It's out there. We mention where it is. They know, but Donna, even around your program with the success you've had, I'm sure now it's more of a pattern. But it's a cluster right after the final game.
Yeah, it is. I can say I'm over here like this is the first year I didn't stay at the hotel. So I'm over here like what I say. So every other year I've stayed at the hotel, and this year we did not. We took our cheerleading team, we took our our administrators, and the hotel we had didn't offer breakfast. It wasn't conducive, and we stayed somewhere else. This is the first year and all the years I've been. But it is, you do look on there and you do say, oh, where are we staying this year? And I have had the Marriott or the Griffin Gate. I've had the hotel right off the expressway. Like we've stayed at all of them except this year. But it was more built on like breakfast, free breakfast and convenience than what we had,
Yep. Well, we wanted you to be aware that it's just a murmur, but obviously we need to kind of we thought we started this as a service to the schools to try to make it to where, especially during the high demand weeks, you knew you had rooms for your team.
Yeah.
They choose not to use it. There's a sanction for that, which is our message to that sanction, the reduction in expenses is why some of these people will sign up a year in advance. Is at least we know you're going to try to make them stay.
I just something popped in my head, an idea that may work. You was talking about the regional tournament manager, but I'll tell you where you might be able to at least ask for a vote to get consensus on our region will commit to using these rooms or not would be in your policy board meetings, because they're in the fall, early spring, like February, and then in early May. So you could actually say, okay, in the September, October meeting of your region, I would have no problem with our board just go to them and say, guys, we're assigned this hotel, this thing set up as a region. If we vote, that we will commit to using those rooms. I know you may not be able to legally bind them to that, but at least it would be something to help the Bureau if collectively there's like, no, our region don't want to use them. That may be some beneficial information that the Visitors Bureau could then say, okay, well, that block, we'll just go ahead and let it go if the region's already contacted them. I don't know if that would help. It's just a thought. That's not that big of a burden. I mean, that's an agenda item. I mean, you simply put it on there and say, okay, from our region, do we feel like we want to use this hotel in that block of rooms?
No action on that, right?
Nope, good feedback. None of this requires anything. The next item, it's not last call, but we're getting close to last call. Next year is a year we get to deal with one of the more fun projects we deal with every couple of years, which is football realignment. And we've talked about other factors. I want to once again see if there's anything else that we want to try to get data on. David's a guy on David's team, Marty's offered to get us about any data set we need, as long as it's public. If you wanted to do something different other than just enrollment or add another factor, we want to start looking at that in the early fall because we won't get the official numbers till November anyway for next year. So whatever we want to do, we want to start planting the seed. We've had people suggest, we had the superintendent last year during the reclassification talk about a socioeconomic factor. That obviously there's data available. Number of students from outside the district boundaries, that's a factor. Or do we just want to stay with enrollment? So be thinking about that. This will be a future meeting decision. But it's a little bit like, we had the group that came out with a very, very favorable to them a project last year that they did with artificial intelligence, but in fact, they didn't share with us all the parameters they put into it. If we want some parameters, we got to start thinking about that. That doesn't happen overnight. So, anything else? 513, item lacrosse is back up. But a reminder to you that the policy boards are assigned. Policy board assigners are technically under the federal court decree. They're technically hired by the office. They're compensated by the membership. And, we've got some situations going on in lacrosse. I think we've got some remedies, but I think there's some data that Abby wanted to share with you, if you don't mind taking this one over.
Yeah, so it's been recommended, I guess, to say, by the assigners that we move to three main crews for postseason. Currently, right now, NFH rules specify that you can use 2, possibility of 3 if you want to add that, but 2 is the minimum. That's what we've been using this entire regular season for this is girls, what boys. That's what we've been using for girls the entire season, 2 main crews. We've had approximately 360 games this season on the girls' side. Of those 360, 18 of those games were assigned a 3 main crew. So very few, it was a very rare occurrence that happened, and it did happen kind of in a condensed region of the state. It's not a statewide thing that's going on. Of those 18 games, in order to make that 3 main crew, we had to have our assigners assign themselves to work at least 10 of them. So we don't have an abundance of officials who are necessarily qualified to do a 3 main crew because we were having to use those assigners. Our policy is we don't necessarily want assigners to work postseason games if they don't have to. So it would be hard to facilitate that postseason starting in region through the state tournament if we wanted to assign that 3 main crew versus 2. It's been brought up issues of safety, which I want the board to recognize that we've had 0 phone calls, 0 emails, 0 anything in the office regarding safety issues while using a 2 main crew throughout the regular season. So I don't see that as an issue moving forward for the next few weeks. It's been brought up that it might be an equity issue with the boys because the boys are assigned 3 main crews, but that has been the standard all year long, and that is their minimum number that's used for officials on the field. So we're not changing anything on the boys' side. We're not changing anything on the girls' side. The only thing that we've added is a possible table official in the state tournament games. First round.
You know why on the 18 games? Do you know why the assigner assigned themselves to be the 3rd person? Did they make a judgment call to say that they thought that game needed?
Yes,
I can
or the
say-
schools requested.
Okay.
I did a tournament, we call it the Brave Heart. It was a 4-day tournament, and refs were doing 4 and 5 games. And so, I know, Sunday, they were, we did 3 main crews on Sunday because, we were using the same. There's not that many, it was just people were worn out, and that probably would have been 7 or 8 of the games because we did the semifinals and finals, and then we did freshman JV games where we had 3 on that. But it was more of a, we had done so many games in a short period of time, so we did that.
One other thing, Ms. Harrell, I think you might, if you got the data, I think you do. it wasn't just those 18 games.
Correct. Yeah.
The number of games worked by our assigners of the regular games.
That's what I was gonna say. It was pretty common practice with the girls to have those signers work just so they're so short officials.
Even in two.
Yeah, and that's 2-man. So throughout the whole season, there were at the 360 games, 127 of those were worked by our girls assigners. So I mean, it was pretty common. And on the flip side, on the boys' side of that, it's only 53. They're about a comparable number of games. So definitely, it was the shortage of officials contributed to that. But like we say, when we get this postseason, we want our assigners to focus on the assigning part and being there to support our officials and not necessarily working this.
But I think we just want to make sure you got that report. We know that it was short. We can get through these next couple of weeks. We'll make any adjustments we have to make and go from there. The next item, Joe had a little bit of lead into it, and I'll just start this and I'll make sure Joe knows because there's some information in there. But I feel a little bit like we were probably 5 years ago when we started looking at our golf format, and we just finally got to the point where we had too many people and not enough space or not enough time, and we're at that with tennis. We are, to our knowledge, from the last time we surveyed 2 years ago, we're the only state that brings 64 people to a single site, 64 singles or 64 doubles, both genders, to have a tournament. We're playing about 5 days solid of tennis between our individual and team. That's if we get no rain. The University of Kentucky this year, they let us know about Christmas time, I guess. Behind the parking garage, that's between the parking garage and the swimming pool, there were 8 outdoor courts that gave us 18 courts, and it was so nice to have so many of them over there. They took away all the outdoor courts because they're expanding the parking. Right now, it looks like a bomb hit the place, but we've still got the regular UK Stadium and outdoor courts, and Joe can give you the numbers. Same thing happened with some renovation going on the south side of Lexington at Shiloh Park, where they ended up with less courts, and part of that's a conversion to pickleball. We know that there's a complex in Owensboro that has several courts, so they've asked about doing one of the genders because they're big enough to do one of the genders. We're somewhere between 70 and 80%, and it might even be higher than that, of our tennis coaches coach both genders. So logistically, going back and forth between Owensboro and a Eastern time zone location would probably be impossible for our schools. So we know that we've got to start the discussion. That's what today's about, is starting a discussion, looking at options. Maybe it's a first and second round setup like we've done for some other tournaments. I don't know, but we just want to be sure that you're aware that if Joe can keep Sarah away to where the weather stays good, then we've got a shot at getting through this year. And then we're probably going to have to look at structural changes. Just nobody's building big tennis complexes. Now, ironically, the articles you have attached, we got news a few weeks ago there's going to be a great new complex. And there's been nothing but protests since then, since the announcement came out at the old Joe Creason Park. We are not interjecting the KHSAA into that fight. That's a Louisville fight. Let us know how it comes out. But there is talk of potentially having a facility if we ever wanted to have the super large tournament. It's hard to talk about things like this. We've had to do it with swimming. We've had to do it with golf, where we finally just said, we don't have anybody building complexes anymore. And Joe, share with them some of the stuff that you found, but really more the trouble it is just to get our existing format.
Yeah, I mean, we're down to 9 courts in UK, 13 if we're allowed to use them. We're down to 8 courts at Shiloh. We're not even using Shiloh now. We plan to. We're using 6 courts at LCA and 10 at Sayre. So spreading out across 3 sites isn't easy. It's not great for the coaches. They complain about it, go back and forth, putting their team up. And then you look at the team tournament where you have to have 10 courts. You can run 2 matches at a time. But we have 2 facilities. There's a long time back in the day where we had licensed tennis center. We had they run so many camps now, they won't guarantee us courts. We have weather. I mean, you're being a big bind.
We're being delayed. we'll be in a delay if we get weather this time. We don't have the usual options, and it was very hard last year with the Berea Richmond combination just because of the coaching and the facilities. When we talk to other states, and we'll do that again this summer at the summer meeting, those of you that go may want to sit in on the tennis breakout, but you'll find that 16 is the number most everybody brings to their state. So we just want to start the conversation of playing down. Now, we may never change. The board may never want to change this event. But if you look at a 64-32 where the kids could play twice a day or twice in a day and a half, you really wouldn't be practical to bring 64 to 100 or 32 different sites, and it just wouldn't work to do just that. You probably want to make it worth the travel where they have to play a couple of matches. But that's not for today. This is just to let you know the issue. The issue is we have less and less court. And it's similar to all the pools that closed after COVID. Bowling alleys are closing all over the place. It's a problem. So we just want that on your radar.
If I could say something that kind of related to not something I brought up before, because you mentioned the weather issue. And speaking from rural areas, it's been very difficult to grow the programs the way you want to when in Eastern Kentucky you have access to no indoor possibilities. Spring is the worst time in the world to try to play tennis. I mean, because it's the only sport that literally, if it rains 10-minute shower, you cancel because it's just too slick, too dangerous to play on. And I know we've had also the same conversations, and I've talked before about other states that do soccer in the spring. I've always thought there should be a flip-flop of tennis and soccer at some point, because you could then grow soccer in the rural areas where you could at least share a facility. You could use a football field, because in the rural areas, there's a lot of places where there's no place to even build soccer fields. But tennis is a real problem. I mean, when I was principal, we had a couple and I've had 2 children play tennis, and each of them had a season where they only saw 4 matches the entire tennis season because of rain. I mean, it was just you scheduled 2 or 3 a week, and there was weeks you got none of them in because there's no other option. So it's just something I wanted to throw out to the board again in the future to look at stuff, because we're hurting opportunities for kids, I think, in both areas because of the timing.
I think you bring up one point that the board needs to keep in mind. At least Sam Sparks has forever etched this in most of our minds, that we wouldn't ever add anything to fall without taking something away. Fall,
right? Yeah.
No. That's a good point, because fall is full.
Spring is the same now.
Yeah.
Spring is.
Yeah. Well, that's why I would always suggest.
Interestingly, as we look at sending out the triennial survey Monday, trying to determine, for the first time, we're asking about if they want to do girls flag as a state championship. They want to do there's 3: stunt and pickleball. We're also asking them if they say yes, when. Because that's the constant thing we're hearing is we're full.
For girls flag. Maybe it's girls flag.
That's what they play.
Oh.
That's the class is done. Okay. Again, no action, but as we work toward a potential resolution, we want to be sure that you're aware that we'll work with the officers on which agenda that goes on. But we want as much notice as possible to schools. State soccer bracket construction. Again, our plan is to bring to you some thoughts on how we can do soccer a little bit different in the postseason in terms of once we get to region winners. Once we get some bracketing, we have all talked about the disparity in scores and things like that in certain state levels. We've tried to address those. We've tried to make it to where the best games of the year are the last games of the year, and we're not successful in that. So it's just something we've been toying with, and we're going to be bringing you some things, and we'll work again with the officers on getting that on the agenda. It could be rankings. It could be playing east and west half of the state, like the 4th round or 3rd and 4th round of football. We'll bring you something like that. We simply probably don't need a state tournament with a mercy rule game if we can possibly help it. Now, granted, sometimes teams are just better, but that's probably, if we've done our job early on, maybe we can make the whole experience better, and then participation's better et cetera. We want the excitement around it. That's on there. That's a carryover item, nothing new today. What is new today, we do have some really good information on the next item. Because I've been in communication with the GM, I think she's the GM, of the local soccer team. And we want to talk, and we want to finalize in July. Even if we don't mess with the first two rounds, we definitely want to look at the semifinals and finals of soccer and where we're playing, and potentially a change in literally where we play for the semifinals. We've got a chance. There was a part of the financing deal to help with the city of Lexington helping with the construction of the new professional stadium here is our use of that stadium for our championship games. Now it's natural grass. It's not going to take 6 games in 3 days and probably do any good for the surface. We probably need to think in terms of our final games. But it will be a great opportunity for our students. But if we do that, we're probably committing to trying to figure something else out on the semifinal. If you're going to play your finals at the championship site like that, then you've got to ask yourself, do we really want 4 teams, likely not only one of which is from around here, coming to a high school in a neutral spot to play a semifinal? Or do we want to do it where they're playing at one of the others based on some kind of ranking, whatever they're playing? Somebody's got a home game. Keep the home excitement. That's a yes or no question for later on, but I think we know that the likelihood of hosting more than 2 games is it's going to be good if we can get it in with their schedule, because they've got a men's and women's team now that uses the big stadium. So they're working. They're going to give us some options, but all we're going to ask for today is just let us look at the final game and come back to you in July for ideas on the anything else.
And I think that really kind of marries up both the previous agenda items as well, because they all kind of work off of each other in terms of how the postseason looks and timing.
Yeah. You ready?
Yep. Move on to calendar.
The corresponding date calendar, staff is proposing a couple of changes, and they're relatively minor. And we just kind of want to talk them through, if you don't mind. One of which is a shift in the last week of soccer. We want to try to create a conflict between soccer and volleyball instead of a conflict between soccer and cross country. And it's partly it's staffing, partly it's we want to ensure availability of the new stadium. Partly there's lots of reasons, but we talked about that. And then as staff met the other day for final revisions on the corresponding dates, and these drive everything, take a look at field hockey and lacrosse. And I think the feedback we've gotten, especially on lacrosse and even boys volleyball, is we want to look at we've compacted the end of the year instead of spreading that out like your first round and quarterfinals being 1 week. You got your proper rest in between, semifinals and finals being another week. Similar like what we just did a year ago, 2 years ago with soccer. Get them spread out a little bit apart with field hockey and lacrosse. That may mean that early events, they play more than 2 or 3 times a week, but they're doing that now. But the state championship, that's been I think it's been a consistent feedback that this bam, especially the field hockey, bam, bam, bam of the region and states contracted into a really tight window where if we can spread that out and maybe do the other games a little bit earlier and you still get the regular season in. So I think they've proposed a couple of cleanups there. I don't know if anybody dealing with the field hockey, boys volleyball, or lacrosse want to look at that, but we're basically trying to get it back to where there's a week for those key rounds. Now, I think the net effect really is the movement 1 week later of soccer. That's all. Everything else is just restructuring the weeks. But if you all are comfortable, then this drives our finalizing our online calendars, our reference calendars, but we don't need to have 3 calendar adjustments going at the same time.
I just want to ask a question. Is it any change? Because the fall schedules are already set. Are you saying that this is just pointing at the postseason rounds of the fall schedule?
Nothing for regular.
I'm just making sure because I was like, man,
no, nothing for regular season.
In the regular season.
And nothing for regular season in the other.
This is postseason.
Yes.
Okay.
We would be looking, depending on what we do with the state site, we could stretch out postseason in soccer for 1 year and make a regular season adjustment a year later if we needed to. We give everybody time to schedule, but nothing on field hockey and nothing on lacrosse and boys volleyball. It's just how we structure the last 2 rounds. As you can see when you compare, lacrosse is probably the first one you come to that'll show it. It's kind of a 2-week window right now that overlaps a series of weeks. And they just suggested that we look at backing things up a little bit. So it'd still be ending. The region would still be, for example, in lacrosse, the region would still be Federation Week 44, no matter what. So your corresponding schedules don't change. It's just your state rounds that might change a bit. They might even be able to get, Butch was talking earlier about playing on one day, flexibility to move a day, playing on, it gives them even more flexibility. And we're going to need that with lacrosse on our official situation. We're going to be able to spread those games out. Any thoughts, any real hesitations? We'll keep you in the loop. And they were really trying to drive down consideration of the calendar first time in a while, deep. So under the calendar, you also have a schedule of meetings. Butch, you want to remind them about the July meeting, and then we'll cover the other meetings. See if anybody's got any problems.
July board meeting will be July 30th through August the 1st for this year, and we're at Hyatt and then we did finalize. We had initially had set the date for 2026. We're seeing more and more now. We got to put these things out a year in advance, even more than that. And KHSAA moved their dates. So we were able to secure the loft on the levee for July 2026 back in Newport. And that is July the 22nd through the 24th, 2026.
The other dates, do any of you looking at your calendar see any major conflicts? We were able to get the Central Bank Center for the 18th for the delegate assembly. So we'll have the board meeting the 17th, and that will help some of you traveling. Just have to travel once. We were able to get those back to back. The November 13th date is corresponding to this year. The January 15th date is corresponding to February 19th. And then again, next May this week. If nobody sees any issue with those, what we will do is we'll get it put in our calendar and get you a calendar invitation there for come through on your. Seems to help. Get them on there. All right, thank you. So, yeah, all of these would be moved forward. The field hockey and lacrosse timeline we kind of covered with the corresponding dates though. And the state soccer championship calendar, we kind of covered it. Chad, you don't have anything additional. We ended up moving the finance and business items, so you've got those. The handbook items, you have in the material and attached, and we'll double check to make sure it's all right. You have the latest versions. I think they're in another agenda item. I got to move them back here so you got them. But the latest version of the Constitution, bylaws, due process, and policies. That's the 4th section. So that's just for your information. Let you know you want to share with them where we are.
So with Senate Bill 6, Senate Bill 6 was not intended to have anything to do with us, but it dealt with how regulations, administrative regulations were filed. And, it was really taking away some of the authority of the executive branch and giving more to the legislative branch to be involved in that process. As soon as that bill was passed, a lawsuit was filed by everybody to challenge the ability to have Senate Bill 6 sought, or whether or not Senate Bill 6 was constitutional. It's my understanding that there's a separation of powers claim. There is ongoing litigation. That a couple of weeks ago we haven't heard, but for right now, the executive branch, the governor has to sign off on all administrative regulations when they're filed, which is different. And so at this point, the governor has decided not to do that for this past month. Now the court should be issuing an order case very soon in terms of is it jumping for what stages will be going forward with litigation. and talking with my counterpart at the Department of Education, the Board of Education. Our reg is in good shape. Everything is fine. There's no reason to have any issues. As soon as the governor's office makes a decision about how we're going to move forward, assuming they go on and forward, ours will be the first batch. Hopefully, May 15th. It is too much of a going down. The process for promulgating administrative regs continues. Very long process and hard to explain to people because it takes more than a year. And, it will take more than a year if we get to September. Theoretically, we're voting on new proposals. But the party would have to take effect. So it's a challenge.
Questions on that process for me? So that's kind of where we are at this particular point on the things related to the regulation. The next discussion, we've got a report for you. We've been looking, this is under bylaw 6 and really 6 and 7. It's the same document. You all have got a copy of a document that's a compilation. And I think our goal today, and talking with the officers, our goal today was simply to come up with some written parameters with which we can then develop a formal proposal for you all to look at in July. That may mean that some of these things come out, some of these things come in, but the material would talk about a couple of things. So I think I stress that none of these are formal. This is a checklist, and upon approval, and once the editing's done, they'll be made public, so you can expect to get questions about it. But this is just a summary of the identified. None of this is a formal proposal. Checklist to be used by staff to get you all a rules proposal. First is the data study. If you look at that, I mean, we know there's some things we want to do. If you, in your review of the transfer form, which kind of gives us the existing data, if you have things you want added to that list to make sure we capture, we are going to have to do this study, we're going to extract the baseline data of all the transfers that have been processed, which our system was primarily used simply to generate the ruling letters. There was never intention of this to create some kind of crosstab. So we're going to take that as our list of students that have been processed, and staff's going to have to manually go through all of the rulings from the past 3 years and fill out some fields. And these are the fields we identified that we definitely want to have involved. So we can do some comparison. Is there a particular area where more transfers occur? Is there a particular sport where more transfers occur? Those kind of things. We want to look at it. So, but if you come up with something that, please just let us know. This is a working document. This is just a checklist of all the 1.5 to 2 years worth of discussions that's been held about the transfer. So that's the data thing. The rule construction. Bylaw 6 is in 3 sections. Section 1 is the rule basics itself. That basically is if you've played, you're ineligible if you change schools after 9th grade. Okay, so we've had several things suggested. So we're going to look at presenting you alternatives such as a de minimis participation definition. So in other words, right now, kid gets in the game 1 second, kid pinch runs 1 time. The kid has anything that they're locked into the transfer rule. There seems to be some favor among groups we've talked to, when we've talked to you, etc. What about a percentage similar to the college rule that maybe it's 15%, maybe it's 20%. If you don't exceed that, you're not automatically locked in. So we want to present that to you. We don't know what that final shape will be because all of these puzzle pieces have to go together. But we do think that will address a number of things. What we've heard out in the schools and from your all's discussions and everything, we've heard people talking about, could the rule apply maybe not until the 10th grade? That's what some states are doing. They're putting it in the 11th grade, 10th grade. We may not need to do that. We may be able to leave the threshold at 9 if we've got some kind of de minimis level where if you've not done a certain amount, you're not subject to this. It may give you the same effect. And the effect is to make sure that, number one, our coaches aren't manipulating the rule by putting everybody in the first game of the year or first time of the year. So that's what's going on. We know that. And so can we disincentivize that and let people that are talking about having some choice, let them understand, we don't want a one-time free. Don't want that at all. But we also maybe need some kind of threshold. Where that number comes out is what you all need to decide. That's a policy issue because all of this is a decision that would then go to the schools for a vote. The key about all of this, and this won't work otherwise, is once a proposal is put together, it is everybody in this room's job to advocate for that proposal, period. Because we've come in here together and you all have collectively decided what the body wants to do. And we can't then go out, we can't come in here and agree to it and go outside and speak against it. Not gonna work. It will get torpedoed. So we've got to kind of, let's spend this time. You've wanted something more finely honed. We now think after a year and a half, we've kind of got enough feedback, enough legislative suggestion, enough administrative suggestions. We're pretty good at where we need to be to get you options and other state options.
So, do you think this is a good time to address the one-time transfer in terms of how some people are calling it that when it's not?
I think we did that earlier, but it doesn't hurt to remind that nothing about this, nothing about any of the drafting calls for consideration of a one-time transfer. But you got to define one-time transfer first. And it's different. Everybody that's got it defines it different. You know, Indiana is a true one-time transfer. You get to go, you get changed once a year or once period. Florida, you get changed once a year. Depends on where you are. But others, their one-time transfer is conditional. Even Tennessee's that got a lot of the press is not really one-time transfer. It's you got to have certain sets of circumstances that you can document, and the sending schools got to agree. So they're all different. So when people put the colloquial expression one-time transfer out there, there's no consistent difference. So we're not, nobody that I know of around this table has strongly advocated for a free one-time transfer. So I think that can probably, no matter how you define it, can kind of be put to bed. What we're now looking at is, can we look at this from a standpoint of maybe this kid shouldn't have been subject to the rule? The cases that these guys hear all year long. The guy that was a pinch runner one time, the guy that got in on one kickoff. Ohio's transfer rule, for example, specifically exempts kickoffs from counting. They said, look, you throw everybody out there to give them a chance to play. We're not going to lock them in because they played a kickoff. It's hard, but if we don't finally get something on paper for you in July for the second reading, our delegates aren't going to be ready to consider it in September. And we cannot keep kicking this can down the road. We need to do this between sessions to where we don't even get dust-ups if we can help it. So that's in section 1. But the second part of section 1 is to look at penalties. You know, I've got a handout that I did around the office, and I can share with everybody if you want to look at it. But we've kind of looked at this on a continuum, basically by that I mean starting at practice all the way through the scrimmages, all the way through parts of the season, then postseason. So is the penalty appropriate that it's always 1 year, no matter what, no matter when it happens? Or are there ways we can give it a different look and say that perhaps at one point in time, you're just out this year, but you can start over next fall, or you start over the next season. But if there's certain things that happen late, no, we're going to do something different. I think that's where a lot of the suggestions seem to be coming. Again, we could throw down things in the rule and you all come in July and don't approve one bit of it to go forward. But until we get to where we kind of feel like we got something to go forward, y'all can talk about, you're not going to be able to make a decision. We can't just sit in here and throw bad examples out. Well, I know this one kid back in 55 that did this. I mean, at some point, no matter what rule you pass, somebody's going to abuse it. Somebody's going to take advantage. But are we catching people we don't need to catch? Section 2, as it's currently worded, is now called exceptions, and in reality, it probably just needs to be called waivers. But as we rewrite this, what the general public doesn't understand is there's 11 different waivers that have been adopted by the schools, whether it's been legislative influence, school influence, this room's influence. There's 11 different waivers because we've had to keep modern with times. Well, we want to give you a couple of others. Right now, in the bona fide change exception, which is the most commonly used one, we require vacating of the former residents and documentation of that. Pretty sure we're the only state that requires that. Most everybody else is looking at the standard a DPP would use. Are you in our district? Can I legally enroll? Have you got utility bills? Have you got rent receipts? Whatever. We'll throw that out there to you. See if you think that goes. So you're seeing already the complexity. It's a little bit of the old joke about Chinese menu. You got to pick one of every column, but you're going to have to get this down where you can look at it. One of the flaws we see in the current rule that we know needs to be done is the way the rule reads. You know that if you've changed schools after playing, you're ineligible. But there's reasons why you can become ineligible or become eligible in Section 2. But then there's this Section 3 piece out there, which says, even if I meet an exception in 2, that can be overridden by the fact that I played for a coach or I quarreled over playing time or something like that, and we can document. That's fine, but that doesn't apply to cases where the ruling officer or hearing officer has made a ruling or recommendation because, yes, we'll admit the student didn't meet an exception, but we've got a lot of facts here. The student needs to be eligible. Right now, that athletic advantage piece can't apply there. We can tell you of situations where even with the terrible circumstances, kid probably shouldn't be eligible because something's going on with that exception. So we think that could be in there. We want to look at a waiver of financial conditions. I'm telling you, in our hearing officer rulings, that is appearing more and more where these retired circuit judges are looking at this evidence and saying, I know it doesn't fit your pretty rule, but this student, entire family lost their job and they had to go back to where they were before, or we've got to probably put some allowance so it's the same rule from Murray all the way to Ashland and not just the few that are smart enough to get in the room, get in the hearing officer room. We'll look at that. And then the latest trend in some of the other states will show you a possible exception related to documentation of mental health issues. Now, if you read our bylaw 2 and 3, which are age and number of years, in rule, in statute, even in one of them, I guess both of those, you can get a waiver of that, but you have very specific documentation you have to get. Doctor, superintendent, principal, maybe there's a list that would keep it from Johnny's got a headache problem, he needs to go to another school. Keep it being something that we can all live with. You can all live with going forward. And the other thing is that's where you see there's an item at the bottom of Section 1 and 2. We really, if you like the 10th grade concept, and a lot of people on the board have been talking about that and expressed favor in that, it probably doesn't need to be in Section 1 because of the way our new electronic system is going to be written. It's probably going to have to be an exception or waiver because they're going to make it a button and click. So that's just a semantical thing, but that's if we get to that point where the 10th grade provision starts to find more favor, and I think there's a lot of people supporting it, then we want to put it in the right spot. That's the only reason that's duplicated. These are all just notes cobbled together. Section 3, want to review the athletic advantage provisions, make sure we're up to date. Some of those, there's one of those that's out of date, and one refers to a bylaw that doesn't need that number in there. Coaching provisions. If it doesn't say you've been coached at a high school, it says you've been coached. And we need to make that clear. That's also individual instruction without the permission of the students enrolled school. We're seeing that a lot. That's happening. And even though it could be done by interpretation, it probably needs to be in the rule. And then we want to make sure that we tie back, as we said, Section 3 to strict application. And we want to look even at the burden. And I think that last alternative is something you all might want to talk about. And it might be one of those things that never gets a motion, even in the board meeting. Or it might get something that the board likes and never gets a motion at the annual meeting. But we really have to ask if we want to leave the athletic advantage piece in the rule period. It would make it a totally objective standard, but right now there are a lot of people who will murmur about athletic advantage, but will not write down things and will not provide the right documentation. And it is a very high bar. And you just got to decide if you want that. So the process, and the next piece is the process. This is really not part of the proposal, but we know the transition to digital forms can't happen fast enough for our staff. I can tell you that right now. We want to talk about the viability of removing the parents' little signature spots, because really this is an interaction between a school and the association it's paying to belong to. That form is. Not saying the parents aren't involved, but we need to empower the schools to where they're not circumvented on the form, et cetera. It needs to be the school filling this out, and they inform the parents what's going on through their AD, designated rep, or whatever. So we know that process needs to clean up. We really want, and I know Darren has said this on several occasions, that if we've got a sending school that's got a problem with something, they're going to have to put something in writing. They're trying to say something didn't happen. They're going to have to pony up right then. And with our new system, we think we can lock them out to where they can't say that if they don't provide something. So we're able to close some things that have been problems. And everything would have to be submitted. The last piece on bylaw 6 is simply, I don't think we can do enough education sessions. And I think somebody said this earlier about a transfer. I think it was maybe one of our guests, but there's people that no matter how much time we spend at a regional meeting or an individual thing, our schools do not understand the transfer. And all they know is the principal's breathing down their neck because the parents are breathing down her neck and want to know why the answer is no and what they got to do to make it a yes. So we've got to educate. So this is simply a compiled report directing us to bring you back something, but now we've kind of got some structure to it. We didn't add a couple of things that have kind of been talked about, but really got no support. So I think we pretty much got the wagon circled on bylaw 6 options where we can give you a finite written proposal in July that you all can talk about whether or not you want to send it. That would be the technical second reading. You've already done the first. This is just progress.
I think part of the process to add on to that was, I don't think you mentioned this, was we're also going to be addressing the amount of time that the schools have.
That's process. I mean, we committed to that in February. We know that's the source of problems, and that's, to me, that's all a fallout of finally being able to go digital. We're going to be able to tighten down windows. We're going to be able to hold schools accountable when they're sitting holding transfers for a certain amount of time. We're going to ask the board to tighten that time down. I think you all will all agree that we're going to do something electronic 15 days is crazy. And we're going to have some default parameters if they don't turn in on time, because what we need to turn Darren loose to do is rule on a case by what the receiving school sent, and somebody else wants to appeal it, they can bring it forward and submit all the paper. So we don't want to take away the ability for Darren or whoever to reconsider something with new evidence, but the initial rulings we need to pick up.
What happens on that when you have summer transfers that occur during typical vacation times for athletic directors or designated representatives? Does that not really come into play?
It hasn't in those states that have gone electronic because their principals have been able to cover. That may be for some forgiveness on the 5-day piece, because one of the things you remember is we allow them to practice even ineligible. So there's nothing that would stop them through the month of July from doing the preseason stuff. But before that first contest against another school, they got to get it done. And they're back on duty by then. That 6 weeks or so that they're not there every single day is really just, now we've opened up practice. That saves us. So the only thing we're asking today is just to approve the report and direct the necessary action, which means get to writing. The other piece that's part of this is real quick and dirty about our bylaw 7. The eligibility this is shooting with a rifle. It's the F1 students, in particular their enrollment at schools where F1 students can stay longer. By federal law, an F1 student can only stay 1 year at a public school. They cannot stay 2 years at a public school. And that's enrollment requirements under the federal guidance. So what we've got is people that are leaving after playing a year at a public school and going and staying multiple years at a non-public school, which is a membership inequity. So we're trying to get you something that you could look at to decide if you want a proposal to close that loophole. It is becoming a problem, especially with very small schools that have a significant portion of their population that are non-domestic F1 students. And so we're going to have to change the game plan. Now, that's one that, as several of us have talked, we probably need to try to figure out what a phase-in period is and not grandfather kids that are already approved. And that we can figure that out. But we've got an open sore. We've also got a district that's represented in here that is under the administrative regs that have already been passed, can no longer say we can't ask. If they're going to apply to be eligible at the high school level, they have to know whether they're an F1 student or not. They can't hide behind the Flyler no, related to enrollment. So they got to ask that question: what visa are you on? Because otherwise, the kid's just okay. It's okay. You don't have to ask them, but then the kid can't play. So we've got to clean that. So that's cleaned up in the current thing.
I think this is a conversation I had. If a kid had been somewhere else in the United States and already played for a public school, I mean, they could not come to Kentucky at that point, play for another Kentucky school.
The law says that they're not supposed to have more than 1 year at a public school. It does not say a public school in one state.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's declared on the initial.
Yep. And we've also had this discussion before. We've also got to remember that those kind of situations, we want to be sure that if we're going to try to take the Band-Aid off of the transfer 6 and 7, we need to also fix the issue where students are suddenly going from being an F1 student to being a citizen because somebody got guardianship. So we've got to make sure that loophole is not closed. And all this would do was say, that's fine. If you played your first year, you're going to sit out a year. We don't care your situation. Now, the next year you come back. You've had you're just like a domestic kid. So that's what we kind of want to get parity.
This would be super crystal clear what we're doing. So we're giving you permission to write the framework of the.
You're asking us to give you a revision of the bylaw that would include these, which would let you strike them as needed.
And then in July, vote.
July, you would vote to send it to.
We can vote yes or no, or we can
And
revise it, or.
Absolutely. This is all of these things cobbled together are a massive change. But maybe one of them you're not as high on, or because you're not, you want that as a separate vote. I honestly believe our board not need to be making the final decision. It needs to be the members.
Yeah,
but you also
agree.
don't want one flagship negative issue dragging down all the other good stuff. So that's where you have.
I just want to make sure we have the data before we make the rule change, right? If that's what we're truly doing is I don't want to say fixing a problem, but fixing a problem. We need to have the data. We need to have the data before we.
I think you'll have preliminary data in time to do the proposal, and I don't have any hesitation with final data being ready by the time the schools vote on it. But I also know that we want to do more with that data to make it accessible for other people to play with. That makes it.
Right. So I thought about we discussed the 15 to 20% of applicable ballot 23 contests, but we talked about in-season transfers. If we're only 20% into the season, and that athletes played 20% of the season, it's all about timing.
Yeah, they've all got to play together. Those changes are going to have to play together. Right. That's why we need the time between now and July.
When you said 20, that reminded me of something. Would that be, because I heard it two ways, 15 to 20% of plays in a game, or 10 to 15 or 15 to 20% of contests?
All the discussions we've had have been around the bylaw 23 limits and a percentage of that.
But of contest play.
Right.
So if a football coach puts you in the kickoff for 3 games.
Well, I can tell you're going to be asked to address the
I'm just
kickoff
trying to think in my mind.
Yeah. You're going to be asked to address the kickoff play and whether or not that's
that could be a potentially separate from that.
Like pinch running in baseball. I mean, in reality, how much participation is that if you win one time? That's what you got to ask. We're trying to split a hair. We're talking about potentially considering splitting a hair we've never split. We've taken the easy way out, and that's what's being shot at right now. So we're gonna try to figure what's the best answer. We may come to this. As I say, you all may decide we're not gonna send anything. We're gonna keep looking. It'll be your option. This is a policy though. This is where you all weigh in. Be driven by you?
Yep.
Okay, good. So all it would be is just direct us to do it. That's it. Get the proposal ready. And that 6 and 7 are two the back-to-back items. That's what we don't have anything under .23.
Okay. Number 6, items for discussion and action. 6.1, competition rules.
Joe has been Henry Kissinger over the last year trying to diplomat this proposal from the Coaches Association. And the final version is one that we can probably live with, Joe, would you say? Because they're acknowledging the funding. What this is, coaches have been precluded from using golf carts in the state tournament. If the state tournament is multiple weeks, that means 2 weeks they can't use it. Their proposal is only schools that have a full team, which is capped for each week. It'd be eight at each first and 9 at the other. Yeah. So they've also specified the one thing that the tightwad wanted was they specified who's paying for it. And it is at the school expense. Joe, anything else from your discussion with them? Anything you want to add?
No, I mean, if you read the letter, it's pretty well thought out. I do think he overplayed the safety aspect. But the thing that I talked to one of the coaches on that letter that didn't address was you have a lot of coaches who have been gaming the system. Getting a doctor's note, getting that 88 card, and then all of a sudden they have a competitive advantage over the people playing by the rules. So this at least levels the playing field for the team.
Yeah, much like the other emails that were going around on one of the lacrosse issues, safety is a red flag word that just doesn't help. But it does help. But we definitely would. This is one of those items you vote on to adopt today. This is one of those we recommend. So we can tell them in the clinics.
I know a couple of years ago we added the number of coaches they could have because they didn't have carts. Will we reduce that back to 1 or 2 for a team?
All are interested to have that discussion. We haven't talked about
it. Yeah, that'd be something we would do. Do you think that should happen?
Well, I mean, the reason we added it was because coaches, if they had 5 players on the course and they couldn't have a cart, so we let teams have up to 5 coaches. But I don't know that we need that if we're giving the head coach a cart. Now, maybe you do 2 coaches to allow them to have 1 other assistant.
Are you limiting the number of cards they can have?
Just one per.
Yeah, 1 per school.
Well, then I would think if it's up on that school to pay the cost of that cart, some of them may choose just to keep the individual coaches and live with them. I mean, that may be what you see as an option there, because even if you were one coach, let's say you had 2 coaches, then the other coach wouldn't have a cart, and you're still may have 5 players on 5 different holes. I don't know.
Still have a situation with qualifiers. Well, no,
Yeah, so even if and that's something we talk about as operations staff, but even if it's 3, that gives them 1 per 9 in the cart if you had to. But that's something just to talk about. I can tell you what you probably couldn't do is something where you wouldn't know the number. Because I think people have this vision that these events just come together when we get down to the site. It doesn't work that way. You have to know long before they want to waive the cart. You wouldn't be able to know that.
You're limiting the number of coaches because we even said it was unlimited for individuals too. So you got to think about that.
All right. That help? So that'll be a full motion.
Okay. Move that ahead. 6.12, additional officials for round 2 football.
This came from the discussions started last fall when we had a clock snafu in a certain town that Jason Frakes is very familiar with during a playoff game. And the clock was questionable how it was being managed. And so the request, I talked to you about it, and then the Coaches Association has this membership council. That's what they call it. And they would like to have us assign for the second round on. They know we don't have enough officials for the first round, but an additional official, which is a 70% rate, And they would do, their job would be to manage the game clock, period. They would not be on the field, they would call a penalty or anything but manage the clock. It got to be a really big problem in the South Warren Bowling Green game. And so they've been on this since it happened to try to get that cleaned up. So you all would have to authorize that because that's in part of the competition rules, but we don't see any problem.
There's two things that pop in my head, and that may just be me. I mean, this is lacrosse the lacrosse concern being handled in a better way, because this is not coming from the member schools at all. This Football Coaches Association, this needs to be sent back to the designated representatives.
They've all located.
And say that
every one of them has asked their ADs.
It's the first time I've seen.
Okay.
The other part is there could be a gazillion different types of scoreboards.
That's exactly what I was just saying.
There's Nefco, there's Diachronics. I mean, I was at a conference, there might be 10, 15 different brands. We're going to assume that they have an official who knows how to operate that scoreboard at that stadium. It's just.
It sounds like you asked the same question I did. Was it a knee-jerk reaction to the fact the guy that was at that game, which was a key game, was not the regular clock number? Right. He didn't know you.
Right. I just know at our school, we've had people had to fill in, and it was unbelievable having to call back to the other person that maybe wherever they were at. Yep. What button do you hit? How do you do this? And that's where a lot of the problems occur. It's really not.
Yeah, because the play clock's kept on the field. This is not the play clock. This is game clock.
I'm just saying they're going to have officials who have the experience of running clocks available for these brands.
No, they're going to have officials who have experience being officials.
Yeah.
Who know the timing. I think the theory is they know the timing. The negative part is they don't know the hard part. That told them we presented. They've been talking about it for how long? God, I know they talked to you about it. Everybody around.
I mean, I'm not against it. I think it's a good thing. You don't want to be in a scenario where somebody potentially is not being fair on how the clock's being managed at a game. I just think there's some question marks about, is this going to fix the problem? Maybe it's the best way for me to say it.
Should these schools have a backup? I mean, you got a guy that usually runs the clock, but
Yes.
have a backup.
I know it's not an issue in the finals because our people have both talents. They've been on the field and they also run the clock all the time. But this was requested for 3, 4, and 5, or 2, 3, 4, and 5. We don't have to do it. It's not a hill to crash on, that's for sure.
I mean, at a certain point, it's basketball, soccer, it's everybody.
I was getting ready to say everybody can start doing that, guys.
Everybody's going to
scorebooks. You want to have someone.
That's why the basketball tournaments have an alternate official. This is where it started.
Okay.
Pick me a role, but maybe we don't want to go down there. I'll ask them, check to see if their ADs have looked at it. But I don't even know who the representative council is right now. They've changed so much.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
You want to move that or
Listen,
move on, or what do you guys want to do? You want to move this forward or
move it forward and vote it down?
Vote it down now, or just not?
We can table it.
Yeah, it's not acting on it.
I don't. That's
all right. We're not acting on it.
I would love I think the Football Coaches Association should send something out to the member schools as to what they're suggesting and then get feedback from the member schools.
Okay.
Yeah, there needs to be surveying and stuff because I see this hugely problematic just from my experience at the school level with running clocks and
All right, we'll table it. Get some more research on it.
That will go forward.
All right.
All good.
6.2, finance business operation.
First one's you. You're required, just under state regulations, I think you all have completed the evaluation piece, Chaz.
Yeah, that is correct. So the evaluation was done. Thank you for each person getting that done for me. I appreciate that. Those results have been tabulated and condensed into the proper reports. I've turned that over to Mr. Wilhoit, Mr. Howard, and I'll let Mr. Wilhoit go from there.
Yeah, I think it was Friday. I got him Friday. I hadn't had time to look all the way through it, but it's pretty detailed. You can see all of it. What we usually do is, if the commissioner's all right with that, continued meeting in the baseball tournament in June. The staff, or me, Greg, and President-elect, all sit down and talk about, have some time to evaluate them instead of trying to push through. So spend about an hour with them, go over the evaluations. But if anybody needs any more detail, wants to see those evals, let me know. Reach out to me or reach out to Mr. Collins. But you're okay with the June? Everybody all right? Moving it back to June for the eval? Yes.
So generally do, just tell that group they've got the authority to do the rest of the stuff. Don't matter, whatever you want to do.
Yeah. So we'll move that forward. We'll make the recommendation that, we'll review it and, evaluate in June. Okay. 6.2.2, election of president-elect for the 2005-2026. So what we do now at this time is we need a nomination, a second, and try to get somebody next in line. So, Randy,
I'll nominate, Mr. Damon Kelly.
we get a second. David, congratulations. So we'll have a new president-elect, Mr. Kelly. Congratulations.
In the full meeting, recorded vote.
Recorded vote.
Perfect.
6.2.3, minutes of the February meeting. Any issues with that, moving that forward? Okay. 6.24, finance reports and budget review.
Just a couple things. We've been requested, the folks at Ryhurds have a long-term contract. Greg Blevin is taken over. He bought the trophy shot from young Mr. Ryhurd, and this is the time where we would consider if we want to roll their contract over. It is a tremendous advantage to them to be able to have this rollover so that they can buy things when they're cheap and keep stock of them. I know that this year they saved their schools a ton of money by ordering about 2 years worth of metals before the China tariffs kicked in. So, and a lot of the raw material comes from China and then they make them here. So this would be an extension of that agreement if you all would consider that. It's been on a rolling contract for probably 10 years now.
Just a quick question, and this is like sidebar related. And I don't know where this would ever come forth, but I've had with our school for one, but then in conversation with other schools, a question about, because you get those trophies mailed, to you if you're in tournaments, it's not a big deal. I mean, because you're running a tournament, but in football, where it's individual games hosted through, you don't actually play a district tournament, so, and in small districts, getting and having to pay for a district runner-up trophy and then sending the bill to that school, I didn't know if there was any ability to make that an optional thing. Obviously, if you want the trophy but I mean, to have to pay for something that you lost a regular season game back whenever, rather than a tournament format where you've had to win a couple games to get into.
It would have to be an all or nothing, whatever you decide to do.
Okay.
If you want to eliminate the runner-up trophy, but it would need, you couldn't do it.
It's very anticlimactic, I guess, in football to have a district runner-up trophy when there was never a tournament played, and it was just based off of a regular season game that occurred, and then the season's over with, and a trophy just gets mailed that it was a district runner-up trophy.
It's interesting how the discussion in this room changes, because it's been back and forth both ways.
Has it? Okay.
It's been based.
It seems like an unnecessary
It's
expense.
been back on the second round game, which I think would technically be the district. It's been the regular season. It's gone back and forth no less than, I don't know, 5 or 6 times in the last 20 years.
And when we did it that way back when you actually played, that was the postseason and you awarded it, I was okay with that because it was a game on the field that occurred. Here's your winner, here's your runner-up.
Yep.
But when you're basing it off of something that happened, it could have been several weeks before, and then you just get a trophy in the mail and then you're a bill for it. I mean, I don't know. It was just some feedback that I was just thinking, I don't really understand why we give if we're going to keep that same format. Now, if we want to make it the second week, actually do a first round, second week, with your districts, that was actually pretty interesting when you did that, because, you got those chances to have those, almost like basketball. You had the rematch and then you got awarded the trophies. But
that's strictly up to you all.
I just think Noel needs to be able to a bigger trophy case.
Julian, I think the important thing here is that you said it was all or nothing, and that's because everybody has to be able to plan the supply.
Yeah, that's true.
why
It were just.
Oh yeah, I understand.
I think what he's saying is when you give it. This discussion we've seen before. Is it based on the regular season? Is it based on the second round of playoff win? And we've done it both ways. Depending on the tone of the room.
This is just for the extension of the contract.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That was not in place.
Yeah.
This is just for extension.
And we're going to order the same number of trophies no matter what.
Yeah.
But it's a matter of when they're seen.
It popped in my mind something that they brought. I promised months ago a couple of schools. I said, hey, I would at least just throw that out there because it did seem like an unnecessary expense.
Yep.
We'll move the extension of the contract forward.
Thanks, sir.
6242, approve financial reports for July current.
This is as of yesterday, I think, but it's not, we have not closed with the basketball tournament, so please consider these interim. But obviously, we've had some additional expenses this year on both physical plant that you all authorized and the data conversion that you all authorized. So this year may be tread water year, but the rest of the last 3 or 4 have built us back up. So this we have no reason to give you alarm with what's going on. Technically, what you're approving is the checks that have been issued, like your school boards do, but at the same time, we always give you the whole package. You see it.
Okay. 6243, approve budget amendment related to museum storage area.
If you haven't, please take a look at lunchtime at the beautiful series of yellow and silver clips that are holding a wall together for the storage area. And we finally have looked and talked to a contractor, talked to more than one actually, about a solution to that. They are not able to repair that museum wall. That wall is a metal framed wall with Velcroed pieces of sheathing on it that have warped over time, contributed to largely probably by 20 years of air conditioner problems. But what we're proposing is that you amend the budget for this year to allow us to go ahead and just make that a permanent wall. Just get out of the temporary business and make it a regular drywall wall. It'll last as long as the building does, but it would require us to go over our physical plant budget by 20 grand. And we have the resources. You can see that in the worksheet. So that we would ask you to approve during the full meeting. And it's at the same time, this is in the rationale, but when all the discussion with our new president came up about tariffs, our official car dealer is Tanner over in Stanton that helps with the cars you all generously provide, and he provides too for senior staff and their travel. But we had a car that Mr. Cope was driving that had 88,000 miles on it, I believe it was. He was of grave concern that between the tariffs jacking the price up and the mileage getting to a point it was going to drop the resale value, that if we didn't move pretty quickly, we were probably going to have a problem with anything on that car. So I think the expenditure was around 23 grand to trade in and get the new one, which I think is pretty good for the car we got. And we need you to formally approve it so we can deliver the check that may or may not have been written before. It could be voided. But I'll be sure we do that. That's the only 2 things really.
Okay, move both those forward. 6.3, handbook issues, including bylaws.
You know, I would have waited till July on this one, but we have a lot of scrimmaging going on first part of July. That we've been looking at different options. We need to address sportsmanship, but you all already have a pretty severe penalty in most sports that's just apparently not enough of a deterrent. The adult ejection should be 0 because they're supposed to be modeling behavior at this level. So one of the things we talked about doing is, in addition to changing the fine that's levied to the school, because the school is your employee. If you make them pay it, that's you. But it's really a school penalty. It's $50, and apparently a lot of coaches feel like it's worth it. Already, especially in one of our current sports. It's not even Abby, but Mr. Copes, where it's just routine. It's part of the aura of the game. It gets thrown out. But forgetting the fine piece, which we could easily change, we want to try to go back to some professional development for those people. And there are existing things that are readily available through the NFHS Learn platform that all of our coaches have to do some things on anyway. So one of them is called Teaching and Modeling Behavior. I think any coach ejected should have to watch that, period. And then the sportsmanship course for the kids. The kids course is free. The adult course is $20. And they have to pay it when they get online. There's no, I'll owe you. So I just think we're going to have to get to the point where Coach McCallum and Coach Wilhoy, who are at first and third base box, are going to have to decide, you know what, wait a minute, it ain't working. I'm not going to subject my school to a $200 fine and me have to watch it. I'm going to leave this guy alone. He's not very good, but I'm going to have to walk away. That's what you want as a deterrent. It's not meant to generate funds. It's a meant trying to deter. So We want to look at that, but we kind of need to decide that before we started scrimmaging because it happens then, especially in Chad sport. The scrimmages get a few ejections. Major issues?
I think the issue with that coach is wrongly kicked out and there's no review for that, that there's no appeal status for it. I think if you're going to do that, then you need to put in appeal status for the coach.
Well, that doesn't mean we couldn't try to address something on the fine side, but frankly, you've already got a bylaw that says judgment calls aren't appealable, and you've got coaches and principals and superintendents that refuse to acknowledge that. It's just the way it is. A kid doesn't get to take a second shot at that last second shot. They made a judgment error or they made a bad shot. I think at some point you got to take that stance. But you would obviously have some, if you end up with such that you don't honor the ejection, you don't honor the fine either. You don't honor anything. Right. So I think it'll fix itself.
I hope so. There's a little merit. I mean, Chad and I can even talk about, what happened in soccer where the official does sometimes erroneously. They're upset. They get emotional. They, kind of maybe go.
They hear something from a fan.
Yeah, and then they take it out on a different person, and then even admit they were wrong later. But there is no reversal because I even had the official come to me and said, if I,
Well, this type of administrative penalty you could handle reversal on. Okay. You can't on the suspension or you've lost all. There's no way you don't have even that. But I want to tell you that I think, Rob, do you remember 25,000 is the number Frank threw at us for the number of games in the scoreboard for this year? All sports. So you got to watch thinking about an appeal procedure.
Right.
Period. And that's your problem. It's just the volume. And it's a whole lot harder now because baseball coach gets thrown out on Monday. He's probably got games Tuesday, Friday. And you got a weekend.
And even within the process that we already have an appeal process on a video where they check investigation and we're looking at a number. Scott and I have spent 5 working days looking at a video. Doing nothing but that on one day.
Yes. And so that does happen regularly. But what it can't address is DT is filming and I'm talking to McLean and him having any idea what it's just not going to work. It can adjust the things you can see on video. That's your challenge.
I assume there'd be a window of time that had to complete. If there were
it's supposed to be
professional development, whatever you want to call it, training, there would be a window of time to complete it because if they did their ejection and it's over.
Well, it's up to the schools to monitor it. So by their next game, and they can honestly sit home in their shorts and take it. One of the advantages, it's not they got to go to David and have him give it. It may not be effective.
It could be that one game that they're sitting.
How long was that course? What, an hour?
25.
25. Okay.
All
right.
And it's more about the principle of it, LE, than it is the content.
My only suggestion is to leave the penalty being doubled in for the second ejection. My only suggestion, what you have on there, is to go ahead and put the penalty will be doubled for the second ejection as well. I don't know.
That is currently correct.
That's been the current, but it's not.
No, but I'm saying added it to the recommend.
Yep.
That if you get tossed the second time, now you got to come up $400.
I mean, at some point, the school, but that's the school. They're going to take care of it. And let's go to something Russ said. If I feel like it's that unjust, I'll probably take care of it anyway. If I'm the principal, I'm gonna say I'll take care of it. It was wrong. We're gonna get through this, but let's just move. If it happens the second time, it's probably not.
There's a common denominator.
Exactly. You suddenly realize where the focus should be. And I don't know that 200 is the right amount, but I think it's got to go up. It's got to hit somebody hard, especially like Dave said the second time. It's got to hit hard the second time.
But from what you said, in my understanding that would be something that a school could approach, not the number of days served on the suspension, but if there was an issue.
But it's got to be verifiable by the film policy.
Sure, no, I just right. But that's something
there's probably never a situation that you're going to come up with that can be appealable on what somebody said. That's generally where the law says. Plus, I mean, let's. I don't usually do this kind of thing, but what we're representing is interscholastic sports and why we have administrators that would want to not represent that, period. I don't understand. It's supposed to be about positive conduct. You made a mistake. It's okay, coach. It's okay. If you got that close, how many of you that coached told your kids, don't know how many times you do this, where you tell it, don't put it in the referee's hands. Execute the play and it's not there, So there'll always be one we can name that probably shouldn't have happened, but at some point we've got to have our schools standing up for conduct and what the expectations are. So it's been hard the last few years because that's not happening. Our new ADs are under a lot.
The game suspension is staying the same?
Yeah, no change there. Yeah. Right now that doubles as you go up, but no change. You all the board put this in. I think we proposed something a little less, and the board said, nope, by God, 3 games for coaches and 2 for football coaches. We want the coaches in particular to be models of good behavior, period, not what they see on TV. So if that philosophy's changed, we just need to know.
And we're still seeing, we had a DQ last night where it was an assistant coach crossing the line, and we tell the officials, be a little more lenient with the head coach, but the assistant coaches.
Can they talk to officials? Because sometimes the track record's with the official, not the coach.
No,
if you look, it's an official that's crowd surfing.
We're actually starting to look at that because of the way we're doing DQs now. We can kind of track that. Even there's probably some trend data on associations. Yeah, where certain associations are just certain referee, it's law and order, and others are like, whatever. You've got in an area that Dave's pretty familiar with, you've just about got to do an offense that can put you in jail to get a technical on a coach. Because they're very tolerant.
Not in the soccer world.
No, I was talking about the round ball sport.
Not in the soccer.
What would be the penalty if they didn't complete
the institution? So you would penalize the institution for failing to enforce that. You got to put that in there.
Okay. Yeah.
You as a superintendent would go tell your employee, no, finish the day. Go sit there and watch it. Most of the time, those courses, the way they're structured, it's a series of clicks to get to the next one.
The only thing, I'm fine with every bit of this and all if you want the levying the fines or whatever, but the only thing that I would love to see some ability, either the director officials or the signing secretary for that region, or like if it is by the next morning after that occurs, if the signing secretary wanted to, after consultation with those officials, because you do have situations, like I said, this particular official actually looked at me and said, yeah, if I could do this over again, I would have ejected that in that situation. But you and I talked, there is no means, even though that they realized, I'm all for it. If it's a head to head and the coach does that and the official's like, yeah, that was egregious, there should be no repercussion. But if the official can acknowledge, even the NBA is now coming out after they're pushing reports out about, this call happened, this or that or the other. But to me, in terms of an ejection like that, if the official or signing secretary is able to come back and go, yeah, I've talked to officials, this is a situation that we shouldn't have taken that action.
I just think there's a lot of disparity between, say you're hosting a Christmas tournament and a team comes in from out of region, we know you can't say anything to that referee. And they're talking like they normally would with the referee, and he takes offense to that. There's some more sensitive than others.
Ask every baseball coach that's taking a team to Florida.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable.
Florida doesn't suspend you for the next game. So their coaches just go ahead and get thrown out, and they're right back 5 minutes later coaching the next game. And so they get used to that, and then our guys go in there and get tossed on the first thing. They got to still sit because that's our rule. They represent that. But yeah, you're right, Russ. That's it.
We had a girls basketball DQ this year where they went out of state and got rejected, and the coach and the AD didn't really agree with it. I wasn't going to hold her out, and I said, "Look, don't go back to that tournament if you don't like the way it's being officiated."
You don't go to Coco. Take a break.
No, I don't need to be that guy. I understand usually those happen here. And you're going to say, okay, if you talk to the sign, they agree, okay, I probably shouldn't go. Are you also going to come and talk to the signer, and the signer watch that film and say, oh, he should have been ejected?
That's right.
So we can write him up this point.
That's right.
We'll let it be ejected.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll be honest with you, I would have no, if something occurred out of the side of, I mean, I'm just saying, I see both sides of that issue. You're exactly right. And it could occur both ways where you could have had a situation that, I understand what you're saying. Right.
Throughout the course of the year, there's.
But yeah, very limited. Yes. But yeah, this is extremely limited. I'm not saying this is a race. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah.
All right, let's move this on. If anybody has objection, move this on, vote on it. All right, that last one, 632 requires sportsmanship for ejected students.
Well, that's part of the wrap those together if you don't care, but that with the kids that got to watch the safety course, the sportsmanship course. It's interesting because when we were listening to one state in the presentation at the legal meeting that put these in, they ended up at the end of the year, they do a report and they can actually get audit data off the NFHS Learn and they penalize their schools that aren't policing it. But it's just a school. It's not going back on the kids. So this is really just trying to say if you get thrown out for bad sportsmanship or ejection, maybe you ought to sit and watch 20-minute video. We did this. It was called the STAR Sportsmanship Program. But
okay. Any objection moving it forward? Okay, you guys got anything else? Oh, okay. Is lunch ready?
Lunch has been ready. It should be out there.
Lunch is ready. So why don't we try 12:30? Try to get our full meeting started at 12:30. Is that enough time for you guys?